Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku never met All Might. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, Sleepy Cat's Queen from AO3. So let's start the video. A bird who can't fly will fall. Chapter text. No man is born equal. This was a fact that Izuku Midoriya learnt at a very young age. He knew because he was quirkless. One extra pinky toe joint was all it took to pit the world against him. His friends turned on him, beating and bullying him every day. The teachers turned on him, turning a blind eye or even helping the others taunt him. His best friend, Katsuki Bakugo, turned on him, the worst of his bullies. And his mother, who was supposed to be with him no matter what, she turned on him, neglecting him. Every day was the same. Get up, get beaten, go home, rinse and repeat. All he wanted was to be a hero, just like All Might, saving people with a smile on his face, warding off evil and making sure everything was okay. But apparently it was too much to ask for. Third POV Midoriya. His teacher's voice rang out and Izuku flinched. Of course this would happen. Izuku knew it would. You're trying for UA too, are you? Izuku looked down, burning holes into his desk. Suddenly, the class burst out laughing and shouting out rude comments. Really, Deku? UA? How pathetic. A classmate yelled. A fist landed on Izuku's desk, only for it to explode, making Izuku sink deeper in his chair. Oi, Deku, came a malicious growl. What makes you think that a useless, fucking Deku like yourself can make it to UA? You die in the entrance exam. He cackled, letting off more explosions. Well, I can't hurt to try. Izuku stuttered out. Actually, he could very well think of many ways to disarm his blonde bully, but if he did, he'd get in trouble. You shitty nerd, you can't even talk right. He scoffed. What? Gonna go mute on us again? Izuku wanted to protest, but he couldn't find his words, just like Katsuki had said. Stupid selective mutism. Bakugo, back to your seat. I'd like to continue my lesson. The teacher spoke up in a tone that was supposed to be stern but only sounded smug at Izuku's expense. You can talk with the quirkless thing after class, once school has ended. Wow, Izuku thought, I'm a thing now. The lesson dragged on for what seemed like ever. A storm of anxiety was starting to form in the pit of his stomach. He'd just have to bolt. Finally, the lesson ended and he sped to pack his things away to avoid his former friend. Just as he was about to store his analysis notebook in his bag, it was snatched from his grasp. His gaze shot up to see Bakugo looking down at him, notebook in his hand. Kaken. Izuku yelped, fear lacing his voice. Katsuki's eyes flickered over the title of the book, Hero Analysis for the Future, and his face contorted with rage. What's this, Deku? Notes can't help to be a hero. You won't be needing this anymore. Izuku's eyes widened as he processed the words. And no, he started but was cut off by crackling and pops that was shortly followed by a small explosion and the rustle of pages as it was tossed out of the window. He had little time to react before getting shoved out of his seat and his back hit against the wall, making Izuku let out a small yelp. Katsuki placed his hand on Izuku's shoulder and smoke started rising from Izuku's uniform from under Katsuki's grasp. Now, Deku, I'm gonna be the only one going to UA from this shitty school, you hear me? Izuku couldn't find his voice, and this made Katsuki furious, his grip tightening. This wasn't looking good. He shoved Izuku down again and stomped on Izuku's hand. And a crack was heard as Izuku bit back a scream, tears threatening to spill. There went his wrist. Bakugo, satisfied with his job, turned to leave, stopping in the doorway. He looked at Izuku with a feral grin and spoke the words that Izuku would have etched in his head for the rest of his life. You know, Deku, he spoke finally, if you really want to be a hero, there actually might be a way. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of a building. And with that, he left, leaving Izuku to drown in his cruel words. Izuku found himself being carried by his legs out of the school building, a numb sensation washing over him like a tsunami. He peered into the koi pond to see the fish nibbling at his book, scaring the fish away. He reached in to grab the burnt, soggy book with a sigh. He continued walking back to his house, taking as long as he cared. His mother wouldn't care anyway. She stopped caring since the diagnosis. He felt a shadow fall over him as he walked under an overpass, not noticing the gurgling from a nearby manhole. Seconds later, he was engulfed by a figure of sludge. It started talking, but Izuku's hearing was fuzzy from everything that had happened. He didn't fight back, not caring anymore. The sludge villain spoke once more and Izuku managed to catch what he'd said. Why aren't you fighting back? Izuku looked back at him with dead, emerald eyes as the sludge uncovered his mouth to let him speak. Why should I? He questioned in a monotone, uncaring voice, making the villain flinch. The sludge hesitated on what to say next, not expecting to come across such a situation. Hey, kid, he finally said, Izuku's gaze staring tiredly at him. You don't happen to be suicidal? Do you? Izuku paused for a second at that, mulling over the question. Was he? He'd never actually wanted to die, but now he just felt empty. Besides, the world was better off without a useless Deku like him. So, he replied, yes. The Sludge looked the boy over. He couldn't even be older than 14, way too young. His expression turned sympathetic. I'll make it painless for you. Thanks, came his sole word. He felt himself get tossed to the side as he blacked out, only hearing a faint smash. As he did so, he awoke to find himself face to face with familiar blue eyes and blonde hair. He jumped up in surprise. All Might, he yelled as he stood. Hello, my boy, came All Might's reply. Izuku's eyes darted to his notebook to see it signed by the pro hero himself. He bowed profusely at the #1 hero, thanking him for the autograph and for saving him. But as the hero turned to leave, Izuku remembered a question he wanted so desperately to ask. So that's how he found himself clinging to All Might's pants as they flew over the city. All Might stared down at the boy grasping his leg as he took off into the sky, eyes widening. Let go, young boy. Izuku looked at the man with an incredulous look on his face. If I let go now, I'll surely die from falling. All Might looked back at him with a sheepish face. He probably should have thought of that, but his timer was running out and he'd turn back any moment now. So, he landed on a roof, setting the boy down. Izuku looked down at his feet before starting. I have a question. Shit, All Might thought as steam started rolling off him and the boy launched into an explanation of his life. By the time the boy spoke his question, All Might had turned into his small Might persona. So can a quirkless person become a hero? He asked slightly louder than his usual tone as he looked up to see a stick figure. But he wasn't fazed. All Might's expression was one that of confusion. Why wasn't this kid reacting to his true form? He expected many things, like the kid having a delayed reaction or something. What he didn't expect was this. So I was correct, the kid said, and All Might had to do a double take. Say what now? As I thought, you sustained heavy damage from your fight with All-for-One, a supervillain notorious for being known as the boogeyman of the underground. And if I'm not mistaken, you should be missing half your stomach and respiratory system, with heavy scarring, of course, spoke the small greenette. All Might frowned because it was entirely true. You are correct, young boy, he started, but to answer your question. The boy perked up at this. No, and he watched as the boy's face fell. His shoulders slumped and he stared at the ground, hanging his head. It's good to dream, but you've also got to think realistically. Maybe try to be a police officer or a medic, and with those brains, you could even be a detective. All Might suggested and he left. Minutes later found Izuku sitting at the edge of the building, legs dangling. He thought over everything, and boy was there a lot of negative thoughts. He peered down. It was late and there wasn't many people about. In fact, Izuku couldn't see a single person in sight. He could end it now. No one would care, and so he did. He pushed off and felt himself fall, wind tangling his green curls. Then black. A phoenix shall rise chapter text. Izuku felt himself fall through the sky and damn was it a beautiful scene. The sun was setting, a pink and yellow sky reaching out with cotton candy clouds hanging in their places. It was late enough that small specks of white dusted the sky, more than likely the stars. It was breathtaking. If Izuku was going to die, he was happy that he'd died to such an ethereal view. He felt himself black out before he hit the ground, to which he was kind of relieved. A painless death, and then it was really over. Izuku woke up to a splitting headache. Everything hurt. Why did it hurt? He was dead. He'd jumped. His brain received information on what hurt the most. His head, kind of a no-brainer, though. His wrist from when Katsuki had stomped on it, and his back. Did it hurt from the impact? Wait, was he still in the middle of the street? His eyes flew open as he shot up, instantly regretting it afterwards as pain racked his body. He winced but tried to take in his surroundings anyway, blinking several times to clear his vision. The streets were empty and the sky was dark, meaning it was obviously night. The moon glowing against the inky black veil and stars more prominent from when he'd been falling. He felt a wet substance around him and could barely tell that it was red. It was blood, he concluded. He took in shaky breaths as he processed everything so far. He'd had a shitty day, gotten attacked by a villain and had his dreams crushed by his idol. Well, former idol, that is. Then he'd committed suicide. But he was still alive. Blinding lights poured into the street as a car sped past, bringing Izuku back to his situation. Right, he could think about this when he wasn't in a pool of blood. He shakily got up, sucking in trembling breaths, his body aching from head to toe. Firstly, he needed to get changed. He was not going to wander around in his bloody Aldera uniform. Secondly, he was moving out of his mother's house. He'd take his stuff and find somewhere else to stay. Thirdly, he needed to sort out his finances. I mean, he'd have to live somehow. Actually, he should probably sort out his injuries first. Yeah, that was probably a good idea. He started to walk off down the street, into the night. The walk was quiet, peaceful. No villains and no people, which was probably a good thing seeing as he was a teenager covered in blood. He stepped up to the front door, about to unlock it when he thought better of it and retreated to the fire escape and climbed in through the window. This was a good call as he could hear his mother in the living room, supposedly watching TV to wind down. He gathered up what he felt was essential into a duffel bag. Clothes, money, his laptop, school books, a few hero collectibles that would sell at high prices, and his analysis notebook. After that, he changed into a hoodie and shorts, climbed back out the window and left. He wandered the streets, searching for a place to stay. He wouldn't want to go to a hotel or something of the sort as he'd most likely be questioned, and it needed to be somewhere he'd be safe. A thought crossed his mind and he set off with a newfound purpose. When he arrived at the place, he stood still for a moment, taking in the towers of trash that littered 𝗳𝗏𝗄 Municipal Beach. As much as he hated the fact that it was covered by junk, he needed a place to stay. He continued in and scoured the place for a suitable sleeping spot. He of course wasn't expecting to stay very long as he's probably just tried to find an actual place to stay, but for now this would suffice. In the end, he'd found a perfect spot that was basically just a cave in a mountain of trash. It surprisingly didn't actually smell that bad either. So he set down his bag and laid down, head rested on the bag. He must have not noticed how tired he was because as soon as his head hit the makeshift pillow, he was out like a light. Izuku awoke the next morning feeling pained and still surprisingly tired. He opened his eyes and blinked twice to clear his bleary sight. What he was not expecting, however, was to see green feathers that connected to large, green wings that came from behind Izuku. Scratch that. That came from Izuku's back. Izuku shot up, hitting his head on the low ceiling, making him yelp in pain. Clutching his throbbing head, he crawled out of his little cubby. He must have been so tired last night if he didn't notice two large, green wings protruding from his back, around his shoulder area. Once he was fully out, he studied the wings, coming to the conclusion that if these wings attached to his back, he could theoretically move them. So he did, and as if it was second nature, he easily stretched out his left wing, then his right, then flapped them, and for the second time within 24 hours, regretted his actions as sand clouded the area around him. Once the sand settled down, he spat out sand from his mouth that he had accidentally breathed in. He wondered if he could fly, but then thought that he probably could if he tried. Izuku then tucked his wings back behind him and crawled into the cubby. He got out his computer and started searching. He searched for jobs, online schools, and places he could aim to get, as well as setting up an account for him to sell his hero merch. He loved heroes, he really did. With the exception of the number 1 and 2 heroes, that is. But he did have to live somehow. In all, he found a nearby cat cafe that was willing to hire, enrolled himself in an online school, but currently had no progress on any apartments. He'd gotten multiple requests to buy his merch from many different people and set a time to meet up with the owner of the cafe. So far, everything was fine. His meeting was later in the day, which meant that he'd be able to sell a few merchandise before heading there. He knew that there was a popular beach further down and decided that they'd probably have a community shower for him to rinse off the dirt and blood. He set off with a backpack of clothes, a towel and merch, and a cap to hide the dried blood in his hair, soon arriving at a toilet and bathroom block. Izuku walked in and set his stuff down in a stall before locking himself in. Izuku stripped his clothes and turned the tap on, feeling as though the water washed away not only the blood and grime but his worries as well. He found it a bit awkward as he washed his wings, as he supposed that he should do so he didn't neglect the care of his new appendages. He got changed into a t-shirt that said t-shirt and a pair of black shorts, musing slightly as he noticed how his wings had torn his previous wear, then grimaced as he realized he'd have to cut out holes to fit his wings. In the end, he was thankful that he still had a pair of scissors at the bottom of his bag from the previous school day. However, was not thankful of how he'd had to ruin his favorite shirt. He was taking this far better than he'd expected actually. Dying only to find himself awake in a pool of his own blood with a quirk. He started heading to the train station where he could take a train to where he'd meet up with a few of his buyers, then he'd take a train back to the cafe for an interview. On the train, it was like he had an invisible force field around him because people stayed at least a meter away from him while they eyed him warily, like he'd stretch out his wings suddenly and whack them in the face. He'd gotten a few dirty stares from a lady that was quite some distance away, and Izuku guessed that she didn't like people with wings or people with quirk mutation. He got off at the second stop and wandered around a bit before going to the spot that he'd meet up with a buyer. By the end of it, he'd gotten a few thousand yen and was heading back to the station to get a train back. He smiled slightly as he stood in front of the small, cozy-looking cat cafe that had a friendly air to it. A small ding sounded as he pushed open the door and walked in, careful to not slam the door behind him. He looked around to see a few booths along the walls and 4 or so tables around the area, 3 of which were occupied. He took in the pots of plants and books around the cafe, and the cats roaming around. Finally his gaze landed on the counter that sported a cashier and a display case of delicious treats. Behind the counter, he saw a short, old lady wearing a pastel green apron that had cat print patterns on it. He walked up to the counter and nervously greeted the lady. "Hi," he said, internally cursing his stutter, "and my name is Izuku and I'm here for a job. If you'd take me, of course, that is." "Well, hello, dearie," she replied. "It's very nice to meet you. My name is Kana Takahashi. I run the place." She walked over to a booth farthest from the door and beckoned him over. He started to follow but quickly stopped in his tracks when a ginger tabby gracefully jumped onto his shoulder and settled around his neck. The lady, Kana-san, had chuckled at the sight of the shy boy freezing as her grumpiest cat had willingly curled around the greenette's neck like a scarf. "Well, it seems you've got Simba's stamp of approval," she chuckled. Izuku continued to make his way to the booth, careful to make sure that Simba didn't fall off. He sat down across from Kana-san and she began to talk. "All right, Izuku-kun, first I'd like to know how old you are." "I'm F14. Izuku answered. "You got any experience under your belt?" she inquired. "No," he answered once more, this time shaking his head, "but I'm a fast learner." "That's good," she hummed. "Well, how about I put you on trial today, then I'll decide to hire you or not. Afterwards we can discuss other details if I say yes." That'll be great." "Thanks." Izuku nodded in agreement. The next hour consisted of him taking orders, learning to use and do different things as well as cleaning up. Kana-san had thankfully agreed to hire him, practically beaming as she said that he'd passed with flying colors. They discussed his pay, hours and stuff like that. Since he did online school, he was allowed to do it during breaks or when business was slow. He was also allowed to use the staff room showers and keep his duffel bag there too. So that day, Izuku went to his makeshift home with a jump in his step and a very light heart. He was ready for his new school course and job for the next day. Izuku opened the door to the cafe and was immediately greeted by a chipper Kana-san. "Good morning, dearie. How are you?" she asked. "I'm good, Kana-san," Izuku replied with a small smile. That's good. Well, the cafe is about to open. Why don't you go change and set up shop? If you finish early, you can start that online school course." "Right," he replied as he went, only to be stopped again by Simba and 3 other cats. One was a creamy white, another was a pale blue, and the last was a dark purple. Kana-san shooed away the cats with a laugh and let Izuku continue. 15 minutes later, Izuku was sitting behind the counter frozen in shock as he stared dumbfoundedly at his computer screen with a surprised Kana-san peering over his shoulder. Izuku always assumed that the teachers graded him the lowest they could. But this was something else. When he got low scores in tests, when he was assigned extra, when he had to do double or triple the original work, he had always studied harder. Yet it was still very astonishing when he passed a college grade entrance exam. "Izuku, dear, you said you were 14, correct?" Izuku nodded. "And your quirk is just your wings." Izuku nodded again. "I hired a mini genius," she whispered in disbelief and awe. Just then a man entered the cafe, and Izuku's only thoughts were, 1. Is that a hobo? And 2. Holy shit, it's Eraserhead. Kana-san patted him on the shoulder and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Izuku as a nervous wreck. This was Eraserhead, the Eraserhead, his favorite hero. "Hello, good morning. Welcome to Paws and Coffee. How can I help you?" Izuku managed to say. The man looked Izuku over and ordered, "I'll have a coffee as dark as my soul, and a kitty cream puff." "All right, just a second." Eraserhead with that he cut himself off because no one was supposed to know about Eraserhead. When Eraserhead, otherwise known as Shota Aizawa, finished patrol on a Sunday morning, he wanted to go home to his husband and mark his students' work. After all, that was most logical. However, it seems that the world just wanted to make him suffer when his husband shoved him out of the apartment saying he should go somewhere to relax. He scoffed and rolled his eyes at the scene that replayed in his mind. Hisashi had given him 2,000 yen to spend as if he were a child. This was illogical. The blonde then proceeded to text him about a really good cat cafe that he frequented. And at that, Shota smiled. After all, how could he turn down cats and coffee? So that's how he found himself in front of a small cafe with a sign hung overhead saying Paws and Coffee. It looked nice. Opening the door, he heard a small ding and he looked around. It seemed that there wasn't much business as no one but the 2 workers and cats were there. That was good. He could have peace and quiet. He walked in further and the greenette of the 2 looked up at him while the older woman patted his shoulder and walked away. "Hello, good morning. Welcome to Paws and Coffee. How can I help you?" the teenager said, and Shota looked him over, analyzing him. He looked younger than his current class, maybe the age of the kids that would be doing the entrance exams in around a year. Shota then noticed the bandage wrapped around the child's wrist, frowning internally as he noticed how loose it was and the blue and purple color barely creeping out from underneath. That looked really bad. His gaze then went to the multitude of scars on the kid's arm. He took in his posture, how he tried to make himself smaller, though that looked like it was just habit, how he shifted and stuttered. How the kid looked like he was making plans so he could bolt at a moment's notice if he needed to. And 𝗧𝗪 thought of 2 reasons why he may be like this, and frankly, both were bad. The first reason 𝗧𝗪 came up with was that the kid was a villain in his civilian life, though that seemed unlikely. The second reason was that the kid was a subject of bullying, and it was bad at that. He narrowed his eyes that only a person who was actively looking for it could see and took his order. "I'll have a coffee as dark as my soul, and a kitty cream puff." "All right, just a second, Eraserhead," and the kid cut himself off. Wow, 𝗧𝗪 thought, way to slip up. His eyes visibly narrowed now and his lips tugged down into a frown. How did he know about him? And so, the hero relayed the question on his mind for the younger to answer. "How do you know me?" he asked, his monotone voice sporting the most minuscule of interest, though he'd never admit it. "Well, I'm a huge hero and nerd, so yeah," the boy explained slowly. "You're actually my favorite hero." "Really?" 𝗧𝗪 asked in a disbelieving tone and a raised brow. "Because why would it be him? Why an underground hero? And why not All Might or Endeavor or Hawks? Why me?" He watched as the kid's face scrunched up with emotions that he couldn't place at the mention of the number 1 and 2 heroes but relax at the third before speaking. "All Might is an idiot, a liar and a fraud. Endeavor is an asshole who just burns anyone he wants into a crisp and destroys literally everything around him. And did you know that he abused his second youngest to the point that he ran away? And that he still abuses his youngest. He also neglects his other 2 kids and he put his wife in a mental hospital. Not to mention he forced his wife into a quirk marriage with him. But I guess Hawks is okay. I mean, Hawks is really cool and chill, plus our quirks are really similar." Suddenly, the kid cut himself off by bringing a hand to his mouth, gaze holding a fearful expression. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words stuck in the hero's mind like glue, paired with the smaller, scared face. It told 𝗧𝗪 that this kid got a bad reaction on this habit on a daily basis. "Not good." "It's fine, kid." From under the teen's hand, 𝗧𝗪 was able to hear the kid's next words. "It's just, you're my favorite 'cause you're really cool." 𝗧𝗪's heart clenched. Ears of mental walls cracked slightly. But it was far more than 𝗧𝗪 had ever seen since his marriage or 𝗵𝗲. This problem child. "Hey, kid." The kid perked up at being addressed. "What's your name?" "Izuku," he replied. "Just Izuku." And then there were more problems. The kid didn't use his last name. Maybe abuse or neglect. Then the kid, Izuku, handed him a swirling cup of dark heaven and a kitty cream puff. He nodded in thanks and walked over to a booth. 𝗧𝗪 decided then that he'd look into this matter. After all, he had nothing else to do. He set down his coffee and pastry and sat down. Immediately, was approached by 4 cats that curled up to him. One was a light blue, another a light yellow, one had a coat of dark purple and the last was dark blue. Taking a sip of his coffee, he reached down into his bag to get some paperwork that 𝗬𝗁𝗁 had given him. Now, 𝗧𝗪 prided himself in stealth, so it came as no surprise that he was able to do his paperwork while keeping a dutiful eye on the kid. He watched as Izuku once again turned to face his laptop and was mildly shocked to see the kid doing college-grade work with ease. He couldn't be older than his previous first years. The day went on as such, the cafe having the occasional customers, either walking in and staying for a while or leaving hurriedly with a beverage or a pastry. However, when there are no orders to take and no matters to attend to, the boy sat and studied. At 8 he watched as the green hair was replaced by gray and white hair as Kana-san took over the counter, leading the greenette to pack his stuff and move to a booth next to 𝗧𝗪's. 𝗧𝗪 wanted to question the boy about his life and habits because every potential answer seemed to lead to paint a very depressing picture. So, after a few minutes, 𝗧𝗪's curiosity and worry got the better of him and he called the kid over. He caught Izuku's attention and it being beckoned over, the boy picked his stuff up and walked over to 𝗧𝗪's booth, placing it down across from the ravenet. He sat down, resuming his studies, obviously curious as to why he'd been called on but ultimately not saying anything. "What are you doing?" queried the more tired of the 2. "Just some school work. I do online schooling and it's great 'cause I can work full-time," he answered with a small shrug. "Why online? Why not attend a regular school? And why would you need to work full-time?" 𝗧𝗪 pushed on. "Well, I haven't really had the best experience with schools and The kid's eyes darted across the room as if he was searching for an excuse. "Well, my mom is struggling financially, so I'm trying to help out." 𝗧𝗪 took the answer as he felt it would be bad to push the boy further, resulting in him leaving. So he stayed silent. He found his gaze straying to the bandages on the kid's arm and wondered how bad it actually was. In seconds, 𝗧𝗪 had a plan. He just hoped that the kid had the heart of gold that 𝗧𝗪 thought he had. His arm swept across the table, accidentally knocking his pen over the table. It rolled to Izuku's side and he watched as the boy swiftly bent down to grab the pen with his bandaged hand. He watched as Izuku recoiled at the touch in pain. The problem child brought his uninjured hand to support his wrist, biting his lip as to retain a noise of pain as he struggled to keep tears from dropping. Just as swiftly as the freckled boy bent down, 𝗧𝗪 was at his side, holding up his arm to assess the damage. He called out to Kana-san and she made her way to the two, confusion turning to fear and worry. Kana-san, I'll be taking him to the nearest hospital, he informed her, leaving no room for argument, not that she'd protest. She nodded in agreement and voiced her thoughts. That'll be just fine. His shift ended an hour ago, so you're free to take him. Great. The kid didn't even want to go home. The hero gripped the kid's arm, helping him up. Luckily, 𝗧𝗪 had the sense to pack up prior to his little experiment in case Izuku was in need of immediate medical treatment, and 𝗧𝗪 was pleased to see how neat the boy was, quickly storing everything in his yellow bag. 𝗧𝗪's eyes found themselves once again wandering, this time to the burns on the bag, also taking in how sandy it was. He steered the kid out of the cafe and saw how the curls of green ducked for the entire walk. They entered the hospital, skipping the wait with a flash of 𝗧𝗪's Pro Hero license, and 𝗧𝗪 briefly wondered how much he could actually do with the card. He catered the problem child into a hospital room that they were instructed to go to, met by a bubbly-looking man with cyan hair and a bun. Hello, the man chirped. I'm Dr. Connor. Nice to meet you. How can I help? 𝗧𝗪 nodded at the introduction and pulled Izuku so he was in front. He needs his wrist checked out. Alrighty then. Why don't you go and take a seat on the bed there and we can take a look, Dr. Connor instructed, to which Izuku obeyed. He moved across the room, too silent for even 𝗧𝗪 to hear, and that was concerning, and took a seat on the bed. The doctor made his way in front of Izuku and held up the boy's arm for him to see, unwrapping the bandage. Both men's eyes widened in shock and worry as their gaze fell onto black, blue, and purple skin. How did this happen? The silence was broken by the slightly shaken doctor. Why, yesterday some kids at school shoved me down and stomped on my wrist. The greenette replied, and 𝗧𝗪's brows furrowed in confusion. I thought you were doing online school, he mentioned. Yeah, I do now. I only just started T today. Are these scars also from these kids? How long have they been doing this to you? Asked Dr. Connor. Yes, they've been doing this for 10 years, Izuku stated. 𝗧𝗪 did the math in his head and came up with an answer in seconds. He was 4. This had to be something that related to quirks. Your quirk. It's to do with your quirk. Izuku flinched before he spoke once again with a sad chuckle, or lack thereof. I was a late bloomer. But how late did it come in for you to be bullied for this long? 𝗧𝗪 pushed on, wanting an answer. I got my quirk the night before yesterday. They don't even know I have a quirk now. Both men's breath hitched as they tensed. Every person in the room knew the statistics on quirkless people. Was this kid even mentally stable? The quirkless were bullied, abused, neglected, and suicide-baited. Suddenly, a lot about the kid made sense to 𝗧𝗪, who stared at the boy and he wished it wasn't true. That's not even humanly possible. Even quirk awakenings are rare. For it to happen to a quirkless person would require a traumatic experience, and even with that it would be a very weak quirk. The doctor rambled. Just then, a knock came from the door and all attention shifted onto the green-haired woman standing in the doorway. Oh, great. A healer is here. Hello, Sandra. The cyan-haired man greeted the lady whose name was apparently Sandra. After the healer had healed Izuku, the 3 adults went out of the room to discuss something, leaving Izuku alone. They'd left him in the room alone to talk. They'd left him to drown in his thoughts. Of course, they didn't know how fucked up his mind was. He could barely hear anything. Everything was static, and it was like his ears were filled with cotton. However, he was able to hear 3 words. 3 words that froze everything and made him go stiff. It was hard to breathe. Why couldn't he breathe? Call his parents. They would call his mom and send him back. No, he'd worked too hard for it to end. He was far too happy. So much happier than ever before, and they were going to take it away. He wouldn't let it happen. There was a snap as the window latch broke and fell down to the floor. Izuku pried open the window and looked down. And holy heck, was he high up. He grabbed his bag and internally cursed at what he was about to do. Crouching in the window frame, he turned to see the 2 men enter the room, freezing at the sight of the greenette. Sorry, but I can't go back, he said, and for the second time within less than 12 hours, he let go. The sky, once again, was beautiful, and Izuku was happy that yesterday wasn't the last time he saw this sight. He'd do this more often, or he would if he actually survived this. Theoretically, Izuku could fly, and if he didn't, well, his viridian wings spread out and he flapped, stopping him from falling any further. Izuku decided then that flying was his new favorite thing to do. He flapped again and he took off into the sky, soaring over the buildings through the peach-colored sky. A thought passed his mind and he liked the idea. Izuku went higher and higher. Everything below him sized down to look as tiny as ants as he flew up. His vision was now of pale yellow clouds as he continued. And finally, he broke through the clouds and his breath was stolen. His eyes shone in wonder as he looked around. It was heavenly. The bright, gold sun hung in the sky. Its light was cast upon the clouds below him, making them shine a pale rose gold. This felt like he was floating above a sea in the sky, and technically he was. He bobbed up and down and sank to his wing flaps as he soaked up the view. After a while, Izuku told himself that he'd have to go back down to the ground, and so he tucked in his wings and fell into a nosedive. Now, people would say that this must have been seriously scary, just plummeting to the ground. Well, they'd be absolutely right, but Izuku loved it. He scoured above everything, looking for his home, flying down when he caught sight of it. A flap of his wings, a swish of sand, and a bright smile later, and Izuku was hitting the sand in exhaustion in his little cave. The entirety of the UA staff was concerned, very concerned. At first, everyone was thankful, happy even, when their boss, the rat overlord of UA High School, Principal Nezu, had taken a break from his chaotic ways. But now everyone was unnerved. After all, this could just be the calm before the storm. So that is how Principal Nezu was cornered by the staff in the staff room. "What the hell is happening, Nezu?" questioned the R-rated hero, Midnight, otherwise known as 𝗵𝗃𝗂𝐵. "Yeah, Principal, you've got us dying in stress. What the fuck are you planning?" called out the blood hero, Vlad King, otherwise known as Sekijiro-kan. This got a few agreeing nods from the others. Hisashi Yamada aka present mic. Ken Nishiyama aka Cementos, Higari Majima aka Power Loader, Onin Kuros aka 13, Chiyo Shuzenji aka Recovery Girl, Ryo Inui aka Hound Dog, Sekijiro-kan Vlad King, Snipe and Ectoplasm. "I plan nothing sinister, fear not," replied Nezu in a sweet tone and a smile to match. "Yeah, no, not believing that shit. You have barely been outside of your office for the past week. Last time you did this, Ishiyama didn't talk to us for 2 weeks, said Khan. "Rightfully so," grumbled the mentioned hero. "Look, Nezu, what we're trying to ask is what's going on, you dig?" Hisashi spoke up. "Well, if you insist. Do you all remember the online school course that I run?" Nezu inquired. "You mean that ridiculously hard one that allows you to, and I quote, pick out the good eggs and nurse them to healthy, smart birds? The one that no one can get past the 3rd grade?" asked an incredulous Chiyo. "Precisely," Nezu nodded. "However, someone has just completed the entire course. He's now my personal student. Oh, and I found a chessmate. I shall allow bets on how many times you think they've beaten me." "What? The entire course?" exclaimed Majima. "How old is the listener?" asked Hisashi. "Yes, he completed the course and he's 14 years old. I'd recommend him myself to UA if I could just figure out his last name." There was a collective silence across the room as everyone realized what that meant. "You mean he's smart enough to be able to hide his identity from you?" 𝗵𝗃 spoke quietly. Yes, indeed. It's quite peculiar," confirmed the principal. "What's their first name?" came a tired growl from a couch, more specifically, a yellow caterpillar. Shota, that's just the question I was waiting for. "His name is Izuku," replied Nezu in his chipper tone. Shota froze. He'd had a sneaking suspicion that his and Nezu's problem children were the same person, but this was solid evidence. Shota now had a newfound respect for this kid, and he'd be lying if he didn't say that he was a bit afraid of said teen now that he knew his capabilities. So, for the sake of the world, Shota decided that he'd keep his problem child away from the insanity that is Nezu, or at least prevent the inevitable meetup for as long as he could. Because Shota got the feeling that with these two together, they could conquer the world. "Any thoughts on this mystery boy?" Nezu chimed. No, Shota responded with a pause that was far too long. The principal hummed and a ding sounded through the room. It appears my chessmate has made his Nezu started but stopped when his eyes landed on the move that was made. What a clever checkmate. Silence rang through the room again apart from the cackling principal, and then chaos arose. "Checkmate, someone beat you. What the fuck?" And if Shota saw Nezu leaving to his office amidst the madness with a smile, no one would know. Izuku sat in front of his laptop in the cafe, mouth agape. "What the actual fuck?" came a disbelieving shout that rang throughout the small place. "Watch your mouth, Izuku-kun. You know, back in the olden days, they'd rinse your mouth out with soap." The stern voice of Kana-san scolded. Sorry, Kana-san," Izuku said, his head bowed. Now, the old lady appeared by his side. "What's got you swearing?" Izuku showed her the screen, and if she swore like a pirate, Izuku didn't say anything. On the screen was the UA emblem. Not only that, but it was a letter sent by Nezu. The principal Nezu. Kana-san started reading it aloud. "Dear Izuku, am I a rat, a dog, or a bear? I am Nezu, the principal of UA High School. I send this letter to tell you that you have completed my advanced online school, and in doing so, have caught my interest. I would love to have you as my personal student. Either that be in person or by voice chat is up to you. You do not need to show your identity. In fact, I believe that it'll be a great game to play. Though, I'd like a hint. I must say, your security is too tough for me to crack. If you accept, I'd like you to send a list of subjects you'd like to explore. If you'd like, you can text me. However, I'd like to see if you can do it without me telling you my number. In regards, Nezu." Both blinked, then looked at the other, and Izuku broke down in tears while Kana-san hugged him. It took a while for everything to settle down before Izuku collected his thoughts and started hacking away. Hacking was a skill that Izuku had picked up in order to aid in his analysis, and he was proud to say he was among the best. So that was how Nezu received a text 5 minutes later. Hello, Nezu, I must say, it was more of a challenge to break into your security. Nezu, you must be Izuku, correct? Changed their name to Izuku. Absolutely right. Izuku changed Nezu's name to Rat Satan Overlord. Rat Satan Overlord changed Izuku's name to Mysterio. As much as I love pre-quirk things, I refuse to be nicknamed after that jackass. Mysterio changed their name to Viridian Wings. That's your first clue. Viridian Wings changed their name to Green Bird Boy. Rat Satan Overlord. I assume that it's your quirk. Green Bird Boy. Yep. But my quirk registration is different. Rat Satan Overlord. Interesting. Green Bird Boy. Also, you're a chimera, am I right? Rat Satan Overlord. Indeed I am. Rat Satan Overlord. Have you decided on your subjects? Green Bird Boy. Yes. I'd like to study analysis, programming, technology, inventing, healing and medical, human psychology, biology, zoology, chemistry, quirkology, anthropology and anatomy for now. Rat Satan Overlord. Quite the ambitious kid, aren't you? Green Bird Boy. I have dreams to achieve and people to prove wrong. Rat Satan Overlord. Say, you're 14, correct. What high school do you plan on going to? Green Bird Boy. I doing the entrance exam for UA. Rat Satan Overlord. If only I knew your name, I'd recommend you myself. Green Bird Boy. As much as I appreciate it, Nezu, I have to refuse. If I'm to prove myself, I must do it without help. Besides, I think it'll be fun. Rat Satan Overlord. I admire your perseverance. I shall help you as much as you allow, then. Though I am curious as to what course you're aiming to achieve. Surely not general. Green Bird Boy. I want to be a hero. Rat Satan Overlord. Well then, I truly believe that you'll be a great hero. And thank you for all of the hints that you just gave me. Green Bird Boy. Totally welcome. Green Bird Boy. SRY, I gotta go. I have a job to do. Rat Satan Overlord. Bye. Also, I'd like to play some chess with you. Green Bird Boy. Sure. My chess.com username is Green Cinnamon Roll. Rat Satan Overlord. Okay, bye. 3 minutes later, Izuku heard a buzz from his phone, and when he looked, he saw that Nezu had indeed started a chess game. Oh, the game was on. Nezu sat in his chair compiling a series of courses for Izuku to take. The kid had wanted to study 11 subjects at the same time. Nezu just had to admire the determination. He already knew how the different subjects could aid him in heroics, and Nezu was glad to see that he was taking full advantage of his situation. Analysis was great to analyze the surroundings, people's weaknesses as well as your own. You could think up plans quickly to win in a fight or protect those in need. Programming was good for getting through villain software or tracking someone. Technology and inventing would be great to make support gear and to fiddle with hardware. Honestly, it would come in pretty handy for the physical exams. Healing and medical studies are very useful when someone is hurt or sick and needs medical attention or first aid. Human psychology was a bit of an odd choice for Nezu, but he supposed that it could be helpful one way or another. Again, Nezu couldn't really see how biology was to help in heroics, but just shrugged it off. Zoology was a peculiar choice, but Nezu had a suspicion that it had something to do with animal quirks instead of actual animals, and he had to say that he himself wouldn't have thought of it. Chemistry was more than likely to help with the inventing stuff like making on-the-go explosions or poison. Quirkology was also a smart choice to help understand the workings of quirks as well as different types of quirks. Anthropology was a really out-there choice for the kid, but the more the principal thought on it, the more it made sense. Anatomy was a great one, too. It could help him with healing and medical studies as well as general fighting and weak points. Not to mention the pressure points as well. A ding sounded from his phone and Nezu was ecstatic to see Izuku had moved in their chess game. So far, Nezu had 53 wins while Izuku had 87. A knock sounded from the door and Nezu spoke a come in, and the door opened to reveal a very tired Shota Aizawa. Aizawa. Hello, chirped the chimera. Shota stepped through the door, closed it, then continued forward. Nezu, I need some help, he stated. I need to find someone. Who? Asked Nezu. Izuku. Analysis. This was a hobby that Izuku had. It was almost always called creepy and stockish. So imagine the surprise when one Izuku found out that his creepy hobby was actually a well-paying job. He didn't know that what he did that was called useless was actually one of Izuku's amazing talents and one of his greatest assets. So there Izuku was in the cafe after opening up, once more looking at his laptop. How did he come to this? Well, Izuku was actually just casually snooping through the hero network as hackers do when he came to realize that there was an entire section dedicated to these analysts. And so obviously Izuku, being Izuku, decided then and there to achieve one of his dreams aside from heroics. Izuku was making an analyst profile for himself and was thankful that they didn't ask for real names or age. Emerald. He was Emerald the analyst. People could ask for analysis on villains, hero costume recommendations, strategy improvements, weaknesses to focus on, help on cases, and more. No, the first thing he did was not sending Eraserhead a very detailed analysis on himself and improvements to make. No one can prove it. So, yes, it is a complete mystery how Shota Aizawa received a very long and accurate report on himself. Over a few weeks, if not days, Emerald made a very big name for themselves. Heroes requested them make analyses of villains, themselves and thoughts of anything and everything in between, and Izuku was happy to do so behind the screen of his computer. Eraserhead was confused. Emerald's first analysis was of Hawks, which was sent to said hero at 7:40, so why had he received an analysis an hour prior? Shota didn't think that people would analyze him first instead of limelight heroes. The principal of UA sat in his chair looking at the profile of a certain analyst. There were only the basics like username and description. It seems Nezu had 2 games to play now. Divided by Green Bird Boy, Rat Satan Overlord, Izuku. Green Bird Boy, hi Nezu Rat Satan Overlord. Are you able to hack into the hero network? Green Bird Boy, yep. Oh, have you heard of that new analyst? Emerald Rat Satan Overlord, yes, I have indeed. I must say, green is certainly becoming a popular color these days. Green Bird Boy, yeah Rat Satan Overlord. What are your thoughts on Emerald? Green Bird Boy, I dunno. He's cool I suppose. Rat Satan Overlord, their gender hasn't been confirmed. Green Bird Boy, hacking Rat Satan Overlord. I can't get through their security. How did you do it? Green Bird Boy, secrets? Interesting, hummed Nezu, very, very interesting. The sky was still dark, but a small cafe bathed the street with a mellow yellow light. A dark figure jumped down from atop a building and approached. As the door opened, the sweet ding of a bell coursed through the cafe, and the greenette at the counter looked up. He grinned when he realized who had just entered. Eraserhead, Izuku said in a chipper tone. Hey kid, came the gruff reply of pro underground hero, Eraserhead, though for a select few, Shota Aizawa, just the usual please. And drop the Eraserhead, I have a lot of enemies, I don't need you to be their target. Then what do you want me to call you? Asked the younger. Shota or Aizawa is fine. You know, I could totally just start calling you Sho, the kid said with a shit-eating grin. Whatever, the hero replied. In all honesty, he'd grown a soft spot for the kid, so he really didn't mind him calling him a nickname. The winged boy walked over to Shota holding a hot mug of coffee and a few kitty cream puffs. Go sit, you must be tired. Just enjoy cat and coffee heaven, he ordered. Shota sighed and plopped into his regular booth, where he was met with the 4 cats that had swarmed him from the first day he'd come here. You know, I should put a sign there saying Shota's booth. I think Kana-san would get a pretty good laugh out of it, Izuku suggested with a small chuckle. Go for it, kid. I've already got a couch, what's one more? Shota said in a tired voice. How is patrol? The greenette asked. 3 attempted muggings, a rape and some dealers. Same usual, he reported. That's cool, Izuku spoke. How's the cafe? The pro asked after a silence. Good, I'm glad I managed to convince Kana-san to change the opening hours so it opens earlier, he replied happily. A week after Izuku had started working at the cafe, the hours had extended from 5:30 a.m. 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 10:30 at the persistent requests from Izuku. Izuku wanted this change for 2 reasons. First of all, Izuku had horrible sleeping habits and usually woke up at 1 or 2 in the morning. Secondly, Izuku knew that there were many underground heroes and vigilantes who couldn't find a decent treat and drink once they had to retreat to sleep or day activity. We got 4 underground heroes and even a few vigilantes. Vigilantes who I will not be naming, he added pointedly. Relax, majority of underground heroes like vigilantes. Plus, I saw Shockwave leaving the area with a coffee anyway. It's obvious he's been here. Shockwave is such a nice guy. He would have made a great hero. He's strong and has an amazing quirk. Izuku nodded. I mean, he can literally produce water and electrify it. Not to mention he can control it, too. Izuku dissolved into a muttering storm about the vigilante, and Shota was pleased to see that the kid was finally comfortable enough with him that he freely chattered away without fear. What does your mum think of you doing this? He asked, breaking Izuku's mumbling. Surely she can't be completely fine with you waking up this early. I mean, you work from 3:30 to 10:30, not to mention set up and pack up time. Izuku's face fell a little bit before shifting into a smile that Shota knew was fake, and he will never admit to how much it nearly fooled him. A smile that could only be achieved with much practice. She doesn't care, he answered with a somber smile. Now, if Shota didn't know any better, he would have shrugged it off, but he knew something was wrong, and this was solid evidence. She didn't care. Not she doesn't mind or she's fine with it, it was she didn't care. This either pointed to neglect or abuse. Oh, was all Shota said. Just then Shota's phone buzzed from its place on the table and Shota picked it up. Divided by lie detector, hey, show 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗏, and what told you that it was a good idea to text me at this ungodly hour? Lie detector, oh, please, I know that you're at that cafe with your little problem child 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗏, yeah, what do you want? Lie detector, I'm putting you on a case. 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗏, which case? Lie detector. The Jade case 𝗵𝗃𝗬𝗏 please no. He's such a fucking pest. Lie detector. Oh, so you know him 𝗵𝗃𝗬𝗏? Sadly. He hacked into my comms and annoyed the shit out of me. Lie detector. Welp, I'm putting you on his case 𝗵𝗃𝗬𝗏. Fine. Shoto put down his phone down and sighed, placing his head on the table. What a pain. What's up, Sho? Piped up the greenette. God, that's weird to say. My detective friend, 𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲 put me on the Jade case. The hero sighed. Oh, Nezu told me about that. He's that hacker guy who hacks into police files and hero comms to help out. Izuku exclaimed. Yep, that one, confirmed Shota. Another buzz came from his phone and looked to see another message. This time from husband. 𝗧𝗵𝗧, Sho, when are you coming home? Sho, I'm on my way. Just wanted to make a pit stop. 𝗧𝗵𝗧, that's cool. I'm leaving for my radio show in an hour. Sho, I'll be back before then, right? Problem child, I gotta go. Shota spoke as he got up. Bye, he responded happily before the hero walked out. And once Shota was out of sight, he spoke again. Sotsuki put Eraser on my case. This'll be fun. Shota was running on the rooftops as he patrolled the area. It had been 2 days since he got put on the Jade case and he still had no leads. Frankly, it was driving him up the wall. Eraser, hello, came a chipper tone from his comms. He sighed as he accepted his fate. Good night, Jade. Incorrect, pencil tip. It's morning now, the hacker corrected. How's patrol? Why ask, Jade? You have access to every security feed in Musutafu, he said in an exasperated and tired tone. Huh, yeah, I do, Jade laughed. Speaking of which, you might want to stop that assault 3 streets to your left in that alleyway. Shota sighed as he made his way to said location. He peered over the edge into the dark dead-end alley to see a man towering over another younger-looking man who was prompted against the wall. Jade, I assume you already know the situation, the dark-haired hero said. Not really a question. Victim is Deki Ito. He's 21 and has an eye color changing quirk, most likely the reason for the attack, possibly a case of quirk discrimination. He started. The attacker is Sakuhiro Sato. He's 34 and a quirk that lets him control small metal pieces, at most a metal bin lid. He's got a history of quirk discrimination and was kicked out of 2 schools prior to him dropping out. Eraserhead dropped down silently and sent his capture weapon to apprehend the attacker, wrapping said person in it. You know, Eraserhead, came Jade's voice, he can still use his quirk. I'd erase it quickly if I were you. But before Shota's quirk could activate, a metal fork whizzed by him, cutting his cheek. Suddenly, the fork dropped to the ground as his eyes glowed red and his hair floated up. Police are on their way. Tsuki will be there, so tell him I said hi. Knock out Sato and check up on Ito. The voice of Jade called. Are you telling me how to do my job? Of course not, he said jokingly. I just cannot with you. The hero sighed. Love you too, Eraser. Jade, disconnecting. Shortly after was a small beep signaling that the hacker had left. Tsukachi walked over to Shota, who had taken to leaning on a wall while waiting. Eraserhead, how's patrol? He asked. Same old. Though I did get assistance from Jade and I've learnt 2 things. One is that he's young, like probably 16 at most, 11 at youngest. 2 is that the kid does not sleep. It's like he stays up all night helping pros or hacking away at police files. 3rd is that he is annoying as hell. He says hello, by the way, Shota reported. Looks like you have yourself another problem child. The detective teased, and at that, the hero sighed. Anyway, your patrol is over, and make sure to get that cut checked. It doesn't look too big, but we wouldn't want one of our best dying on us. At this, Shota groaned, annoyed at his friend's antics but a hint of fondness in his voice. He used his capture weapon to get onto a nearby roof where he took off into a sprint, eager to get some coffee. When an exhausted Eraserhead walked into his favorite cafe, he was definitely not expecting a whack to the head and a scolding on getting hurt. He did not know how the greenette was able to be this caring. I'm fine, it's just a cut. He tried to resist, but the kid had forced him into a chair and grabbed out a medical kit. He watched as the greenette took out a present mic band-aid that was big enough to cover the cut and stick it on said cut. Nimiri would have a laugh out of this. Curious, the hero peered into the kit and was displeased to see it containing lots of medical supplies. His stomach twisted as he thought of why the problem child would need this much stuff, and frankly, all of the scenarios were bad. Another thing that Shota had noticed was how there were a variety of hero band-aids, and that none of them were the number 1 and 2 heroes, making Shota recount the conversation they'd had upon first meeting. Then, gray, white and black band-aids caught his eyes, and he had to do a double, triple, and quadruple take before coming to the conclusion that they were indeed Eraserhead themed, which was kind of strange as Shota knew that he didn't have any merchandise. Kid, how did you get those? He questioned, pointing to said band-aids. The boy giggled before speaking. Oh, so you noticed. Well, I happen to like drawing, and I couldn't find any Eraserhead-themed band-aids, so I just drew them myself. Can I see some drawings? There was a glint of fear in the kid's eyes before quickly fading away. Okay, he whispered before disappearing into the staff area. He came out with an art notebook, shifting nervously from foot to foot. 𝗧𝗏 took the notebook with more care than he normally would in a gesture that would hopefully let the kid ease up, to which the 𝗓𝗏𝗃 thankfully did. He opened the book and was met by a well-drawn picture of the rabbit hero, 𝗵𝗃𝗲. He flipped and was met with 𝗧𝗏𝗍 once more, and he came to best genist. He continued on and saw an assortment of heroes, vigilantes, and even some villains, some having page numbers that didn't align to where they were situated in the book, others having some short dot points that looked to be a short analysis. He saw limelight heroes such as Mount Lady and 𝗬𝗵𝗲, some daylight heroes like Present Mike and 𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 himself. A few vigilantes were thrown in the mix like Shockwave, the Crawler and Mad Hatters, even fewer villains that Shota was not bothered to recall. And then he came to some ripped-out pages. What about these ones? The man pointed out. These are torn out. Oh, those were of a few classmates in All Might. I think I sort of just snapped that day and I really couldn't deal with seeing their faces, he explained. Shota flipped the next page and saw someone who he wasn't familiar with. He definitely wasn't a hero. He was too young, so it might have been a past classmate. Suddenly, the book was snatched out of his hands by a somewhat frightful Izuku. And then, well, the kid just tore it straight out. I must have missed this one, he mumbled shakily under his breath. Stupid 𝗂𝗍𝗃. Fuck you, 𝗂𝗃. He continued to tear the paper up with hands as shaky as his voice, only stopping when Shota placed a hand on his. Calm down, Izuku. The kid stopped but now held a broken expression like he was just so done with it as tears started rolling down his freckled cheek. Shota guessed that this was what he meant by him not being able to handle seeing them again. Honestly, Shota was scared to know the full extent of what they'd done to him. His fear slowly replaced by fury to those who had hurt his problem child so badly. He stood from his seat and pulled the kid into a hug as the teen cried into his hero suit. Not that Shota cared anyway. He rubbed circles into the boy's back, being mindful of his emerald wings that were dropping slightly as he spoke soothing whispers to try to calm him. When the kid had stopped crying, the dark-haired hero assisted the greenette in picking up the pieces of thoroughly ripped papers off the floor and dumping said pieces into a rubbish bin. It was Friday night and Shota, once again, was on patrol. It had been 3 days since he'd helped his problem child from a breakdown, and Shota's mind lingered on the drawing of the blonde boy that had been torn to shreds. He'd have to ask Nezu on finding this 𝗂𝗃𝗃 person. Maybe, if Shota doesn't murder him for hurting his broccoli child, the blonde could tell him who Izuku really was. Out of seemingly nowhere, a slightly panicked voice spoke from his comms. Hey, Eraserhead, Jade here, requesting backup for underground pro hero, Shroud. I sent a location. Get there fast. The cafe had closed 15 minutes before, so it was currently 10:45 p.m. and Izuku was walking down to his beach when his phone started ringing. He froze. The ringtone was one that was only used by an app that he'd created to help with his Jade work. The app would ring a certain time if there was a dangerous situation that needed more than one pro hero. Izuku dashed back into the cafe and set down his belongings, dumping his Jade gear onto a table in a booth. He opened his laptop and put his headphones on as he checked on the situation. A fire. Personally, Izuku hated fire. He had been kinda scared of it after what happened with his father, not to mention 𝗂𝗃𝗃's tormenting. Izuku opened the camera feeds of the area and saw loads of civilians and only one hero. This would be a long night. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Jade here. We have an emergency. A fire at the location I've sent you. I need at least 5 ambulances, police for villain apprehension and heroes, preferably with water quirks, but any will do. I'll get started on backup. You focus on everything else, he ranted, giving no time for the detective to speak. Is that clear? Yes, Jade. Perfectly, came the gruff reply. Great, Jade disconnecting. Finished the greenette before hacking into the comms of the hero at the scene. Shroud, Jade here, he said. Jade. Oh, how fucking glad I am to hear your voice. The hero sighed. Thanks, but flattery can wait. I've contacted Musutafu police, so they're sending medics and police. I'm sorting out backup from others. How many civilians have you cleared out? Asked Izuku. Jade, you're a fucking saint. 21 civilians. Shroud responded. Okay, I'll be here if you need, but I'm contacting available heroes. He stared before muting himself to call potential backup. He sent alerts to some nearby vigilantes who were willing to help and were on the good side of the heroes. Next, he started calling heroes to the scene, the majority being underground heroes, so there was no trouble with the vigilantes. In the end, he came up with 5 vigilantes either already there or on their way, as well as 5 pro heroes. Finally, he made one last call. Hey, Eraserhead, Jade here, requesting backup for underground pro hero, Shroud. I sent a location. Get there fast. He heard a tired okay through the comms and went back to help with the scene. He put all communication on the same line, vigilantes included, before speaking. Alrighty folks, for those who don't know, I'm Jade and I'll be helping out with directions. Let's get to work. He heard a chorus of replies all greeting or agreeing with him. What's the plan, Jade? Sakachi spoke up. Okay, shockwave, water wheel, rainy day and backdraft, you guys clear out the fire. Backdraft and water wheel go inside and try to snuff out the fire while shockwave and rainy day stays outside and waters down any fire from spreading or injury. He directed and saw the four doing as told. Building support will go to Rocky. Use your quirk to support the building with the hardest rock you can manage, but be careful not to block any access points. Izuku told the hero. Sir, yes, sir, called the female hero as she put her hands to the ground, and Izuku watched as a concrete substance crawled up the walls and hardening in place, supporting the building while snuffing out a few fires. Great, thanks Rocky. Okay, the rest of you. Well, I want Cloudy at the entrance of the building to use her clouds to carry injured civilians to the medics. Serpentine, send out small snakes to scout out any civilians. Please try to make the cutest snakes you have as not to scare anyone. Guided Izuku, seeing the forms of the two following his directions. Shadow, use your shadows to move rubble out of the way. Don't be too worried about the building collapsing. Rocky has that covered. Everyone else is on rescue efforts. Save as many people as you can. He called on the rest, getting a cacophony of yes, S and on it, S in return. He looked at his computer, watching over the scene. The fires had been dealt with within an hour, but rescue efforts had taken a nerve-wracking 2 hours. The aftermath had taken also an hour and a half. This resulted in Izuku having to stay up for the entirety of it. After being allowed to leave, he disconnected from the hero comms and laid his head on the table, exhaustion washing over him like a tsunami. He did not see the group of vigilantes and heroes grouped together to decide where to go to wind down. He did not see Eraserhead suggest the very cafe that he'd done his Jade job in as well as his actual job. He did not see the group jumping from rooftop to rooftop, making their way to said cafe. And he did not see them enter the small cafe. As far as Izuku was concerned, he was in a land of sweets, heroes, and cats. That was until he heard a familiar ding and the chatter that emanated from the group. He shot up, alarmed by the sudden noise, only to see the mix of vigilantes and heroes all looking at him. Hey, kid. One of the vigilantes, 𝗧𝗪𝗧, spoke up, tone laced with worry. Did you stay here all night? In a different context, Izuku's deer caught in headlights look would have been extremely funny. In context, Izuku was 14-year-old being confronted by heroes and vigilantes, not to mention his Jade stuff still laid out on the table, open for everyone to see. But he was exhausted. His eyelids drooped slightly and he fought the urge to go back to sleep. He couldn't see right with his bleary sight, but he had a job to do. Not answering the question, Izuku apologized. I'm sorry, I'll start now. You all must be tired, he said, bowing his head in apologies, then proceeded to pack his stuff away. Hey, Izuku, honey, it's fine. Honestly, you look more tired than us. Rocky piped up. No, you guys worked really hard at the fire all night. I gotta get you coffee and snacks and stuff, or something, Izuku retaliated. Izuku, in his sleep-deprived state, let his mouth run. Those civilians that weren't somehow connected knew about the fire yet, and maybe that's why everyone went so silent that you could hear a pin drop. And if all 11 pairs of eyes weren't looking at him before, they definitely were now. Izuku, a certain familiar tone broke the silence, and Izuku's gaze landed on the dark-haired, generally sleep-deprived hero. No one knows about that yet. How do you? I am like 100% certain that I'd know about a fire that I stayed up until 3:15 a.m. helping it. Like, as soon as I heard my phone notify me of the situation, I was off like 𝗬𝗵𝗲 back to the cafe to help you guys out. Do you know when you're drunk and your mouth just runs and you can't stop it? This is how Izuku felt right now. Honestly, I'm kinda surprised that my horrible sleep schedule is catching up to me now. I mean, considering I've been staying up pretty early as of late. Suddenly, Izuku stumbled. He stumbled again, and he fell. Shoto ran to catch him, and in a blur he had the kid in his arms, green staring into black. God, he started, tears streaming down his cheeks and a sad, weak smile playing on his lips. I really am just a weak, pathetic, useless Deku. I even need people to help me with my stupidly bad sleeping. Oh well, at least I tried to rid this cruel world of my existence. And with that he fell asleep. There are so many fucking things wrong with what he just said, whispered Shroud. Shoto moved to stand, holding the sleeping greenette in his arms. His mind raced through the speech as he sat at the largest booth and let the boy lean on his shoulder. Quickly, everyone followed lead, sensing the oncoming conversation. Silence coursed through the group, daring anyone to break it. Luckily, the entire group literally spat in Death's face, saying fuck off on a daily basis. Okay, what the actual flying duck? Spoke up Serpentine, breaking the quietness. We are all adults here, you don't have to cover up, said 𝗧𝗪𝗧. I do, because if I start expressing how concerned I am for the little green bean, I will start swearing like a sailor with a horrible headache and anger issues. She argued. That was oddly specific. Water wheel started but was cut off. Izuku is Jade. And oh my lord, did that get everyone's attention. The sentence rang through their heads. Care to elaborate, Shota? Asked Rainy Day. Did you not hear his rant? I think it was plain as day. Shota growled. That was a bit ironic seeing as my name is legit Rainy Day. Is no one concerned about his last sentence? Shroud voiced. The room fell back into silence. That silence, however, was broken when a certain green-haired boy shot awake, jumped onto the table, grabbed his stuff and bolted out the cafe, leaving the group shell-shocked. Did that just happen? He's too tired to be wandering around. What if he tries flying? The group of 11 shot out of the cafe to find the boy. They split up and searched everywhere but couldn't find him. In all fairness, though, Izuku had a shit ton of experience and no one seemed to think that he'd go to a beach covered in trash. Soon, the sun set again after a day of searching and everyone, as much as they hated it, actually had patrol the next morning, and unlike Izuku and Eraserhead, they can't run on empty. Katsuki was on edge. The sludge villain attack had shown him how weak he really was, and the actual villain had talked to him. He was forced to listen how the villain had nearly suffocated a suicidal teen and how he was sorry that he couldn't help the kid escape his suffering. In Katsuki's opinion, it was sick. Then, after the attack and being saved by All Might, he had been crowded by the media. Let go half an hour later. He'd spent the weekend recovering from the villain and then he'd gone to school. Katsuki entered the school expecting to be flooded with questions and praises about the villain attack. Instead, he walked in to see people huddled in groups and hushed conversations. And for the first time ever, no one paid him any attention. As he walked further into the school, he managed to catch snippets of the whispers, heard about the blood. He was able to hear while passing a group of girls. Real blue Katsuki heard as he sped up, eager to get to class. He wanted to get the story from those two extras that followed him around constantly. The door snapped open and there he stood, gaze flickering across the room before having to backtrack to a certain brunette's desk that was lacking green color. Deku was always early. He stalked over to the two extras that he couldn't remember the names of. Hey, Bakugo, the brown-haired one called as he approached. Shitty extra, he grumbled in acknowledgement. The fuck is wrong with this shit school? At that, the room was coated in a thick, suffocating silence. You haven't heard. The black-haired extra spoke meekly. What? Just fucking tell me. The ash blonde yelled. Well, the day after the sludge attack, there was a pool of real blood in the middle of the street that appeared overnight. There wasn't a body found, but they think that someone either jumped or fell from a roof because there was a chip of bone they think is from a skull. The brown-haired extra informed. And Katsuki's mind raced through Friday's events and what he knew. He had told Shitty Deku to kill himself. The villain had said that he couldn't help a suicidal teen and his misery, the pool of blood, and that Deku wasn't here today. Surely not. It couldn't be. Right. The day continued in a haze, Katsuki's head filled with possibilities. Then the week passed in a haze, until it had been 3 weeks and he found himself at the dinner table staring at a fish with a blank expression. Brad, the fuck you staring at that fish for? Eat, Mitsuki said, shaking the younger blonde from his thoughts. Hag, has Auntie and Co said anything about Izuku? He questioned with a flat tone. No, come to think of it, she hasn't said anything about the sweetie since he was 4, I think. Why? She answered. He hasn't been at school for the past 3 weeks, Katsuki stated plainly. Oh, well, I might just call into then. Mitsuki hummed as she stood to grab her phone from the counter. She dialed and held her phone to her ear in wait. Mitsu, hi, how are you? A cheery voice came from the other side. Hi, Inko. I'm good, thanks. I was just calling about Izuku. How is he? The blonde woman asked. Izuku, I haven't seen him, Inko informed. When did you last see him, then? Mitsuki queried patiently. I'm not sure, maybe a month, or 2, or 5, came the reply. Masaru and Katsuki watched as a weird glint flashed in Mitsuki's eyes. Inko, how old is Izuku? He's 7, right? Inko's tone wavered slightly. I'm sorry, Inko, but I've got to go do something. Goodbye. And with that, Mitsuki hung up. She turned to the two watching her and spoke. Let's go. We have to report a missing person. Hi, my name is Detective 𝗵𝗲 𝗔𝗂𝐁𝐵. How can I help? A certain tired detective asked a blonde woman. Hello, my name is Mitsuki Bakugo. I want to report a missing person. She replied. Okay, who's the person? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 questioned. My non-biological nephew, Izuku Midoriya. He's 14, has green hair and eyes, freckles, and he's kinda short. She rattled off. How long has he been missing? Came the gruff tone, accompanied by some scratches of pen on paper. I found out today, but my son, his friend, said he's been absent from school for 3 weeks. Although, when I called his mother, Inko Midoriya, to check on him, she told me that she hasn't seen him in a long while. The pen stopped and the detective looked up. And his quirk. He's quirkless, she said, looking pointedly at the detective. All right, I'll try to find him. Due to his quirkless status, however, heroes may refuse to help, so I'll only be telling a few unbiased heroes. He sighed. Thank you, detective. She thanked as she stood with her son and husband and ushered them out. 𝗵𝗲 groaned and sunk deep into his chair. He was tired. Actually, that was an understatement. He was exhausted. He'd been on the case of the blood pool and now he had to find a lost kid. Just his luck. He'd just have to tell Shota that he couldn't help identify his problem kid. Frankly, he kinda just wanted the comfort of the chaos that is pro heroes. Divided by pro heroes GC, lie detector, hello loud cockatoo, heya, Tsuki tiredness reincarnation, hello, Tsuki rat god, good evening, 𝗵𝗲𝗃 Bugs Bunny, hello chicken wings, Jade everyone. Bloodbender, it's night you crazy people fired. Stop blowing up my phone knockout gas. Oh shush, endeavor loud cockatoo, 𝗵𝗲𝗃. Knockout gas, 𝗧𝗓𝗍. We should totally take Shota to the mall giggles, Shota. Marry me. Loud cockatoo. Hands off. Joke tiredness reincarnation. I won't marry you. Joke. Flash 2. 0. What did I come to? Rat God. Chaos Flash 2. 0. Why? Lie detector. Because I need to look for a lost kid. Knockout gas. You have a kid. Lie detector. No, I'm a detective. Therefore I have to look for lost kids. But I'm busy with the blood pool case. Rat God. Just ask Jade or Emerald. Lie detector. Jade isn't talking to us since the fire and Emerald is too busy. Their wait line is so fucking long. Jade might be fucking pissed about what happened, but not to the point where I wouldn't help people. I'm not that petty. Tiredness reincarnation. Jade. Jade, absolutely not. Questioning me in a vulnerable state was a dick move. Be ashamed of yourself. Tiredness reincarnation. I'm sorry Jade, you fucking should. I'm not giving you coffee for 3 days. Tiredness reincarnation. I thought you said you weren't petty. Jade. I said I wasn't that petty. I'm still pretty fucking petty. Rat God. Jade. How very nice of you to drop in. Jade. Nezu. Hello. Jade. So, Tsuki, who's the kid? Lie detector. Izuku Midoriya. He's 14 and quirkless. Lie detector. Jade. You still there? Jade. Lie detector. What happened? Jade. Who called him in? Lie detector. The Bakugo family. Jade. Ha. Jade. I am laughing so hard right now. Very funny. Lie detector. I wasn't joking. Jade. You weren't. Lie detector. Not joking. Jade. You go to them and tell them to fuck themselves. And arrest their son while you're at it. I'm leaving. And don't bother Emerald either. Goodbye. Jade went offline. Lie detector. The fuck just happened? Nezu. It seems that Jade knows the missing child chicken wings, and it seems that he's pissed. Lie detector. SRRY. Lie detector went offline. Now he was tired and confused. What relation did Jade have to Izuku to make him so mad? It was all twisting his mind into a knot, and the lack of sleep definitely was not helping. Detective. A cat-headed police poked their head in. The DNA test results are here. And so is Eraserhead. Thank you, Sansa. He responded. No problem, Sansa said as he held out a packet. Here's the results and I'll send an Eraserhead. All right, 𝗵𝗲𝗃 tiredly spoke, taking the packet. The cat-headed man smiled then left as a dark-haired, tired man slunk in. Tsuki, Eraserhead greeted. Sho, Tsukachi replied. You opening that packet? Shota questioned, gesturing to the package in his hand. Yeah, he said and gently tearing it open. Shota waited for a reply only to receive a wide-eyed Tsukachi. Well, whose blood is it? Izuku Midoriya, the brown-haired man, spoke in a hushed tone but other wasn't fazed. As I thought, the hero hummed, Emerald, Jade, Nezu's mentee. The Izuku from the cafe, your missing kid and the kid whose blood and skull fragment were found. They are just 6 problem children in one. We need to call a meeting. Shota grumbled under his breath as he slowly made his way from the Musutafu police station to his favorite cafe, rejoicing at the fact that Izuku couldn't ban him from his safe haven, then slumping further than usual as he realized that Izuku could, in fact, ban the pro hero from coffee. Bitter, beautiful coffee. He sighed as he caught sight of the cafe, a businesswoman hurriedly stalking out with a coffee in hand and a case in the other. Peering through the large glass windows, he saw the familiar warm light bathing the plants, furniture and the few patrons inside, as well as the cats roaming around the place. A smile played on his lips as his gaze caught on the familiar sight of green, bush-like hair. Izuku was animatedly chatting with an older teenager. It nearly escaped Aizawa how both the new boy and Izuku had matching shoes. Maybe that was why they were talking. The kind ding sounded as he pushed open the door and walked in. Some people looked up and their gaze lingered for a few moments before resuming their previous activities. He saw Izuku's eyes roll as the greenette stiffened while the other boy, a pinkette, turned to him and hunched over, looking more afraid than before. He reminded Shota of how Izuku looked when they first met, holding a clearly unimpressed gaze. Izuku looked him over before smirking slightly. You know, he paused. I wasn't joking about the 3-day coffee suspension. I didn't think you'd have the nerve to come back before your punishment was over. Shota snorted. Cats aren't something people should pass up. Plus, I deal with far worse than petty teens. That's rich coming from the one in trouble. Say, how would you like it if I extended your punishment? Shota looked like he'd seen a ghost. Absolutely not. Problem child. I won. Izuku turned to the pinkette who'd just been watching the entire ordeal. Shota meet Sasuke Akari. Sasuke meet Shota Aizawa. Sasuke turned to face the pro and bowed. It's very nice to meet you, Aizawa-san. Geez, the kid has a horrible stutter. Likewise, Ikari-kun. Sasuke straightened and turned to Izuku. Izuku-kun, are you sure I could come here again? They wouldn't kick me out. Of course not. Hey, I could even talk to Kana-sen to hire you. It's real good. I promise, she's really nice and wouldn't be quirkless, I know from experience. He watched as the bob of green hair nodded excitedly. Thanks, no problem. After all, we've got the same situation. Just promise me you'll stick around for everything to get better. An unknown emotion flashed through his emerald orbs, shared by the hot pink eyes of Sasuke. The boy gave a shaky nod, whispering, I'll try. I really will. But you and I both know that it never really does get better. At least not entirely. Izuku gave an empathetic look. Well, we'll never know until we try. The older boy nodded slightly, then left, brushing past Shota, and he paled at seeing the big bruise on the back of the pinkette's neck. He was about to call out to the boy before he was interrupted. Don't. Izuku spoke sharply. You won't help. It'll only make it worse for him. Did you see that bruise? Snapped Shota. Yes, I did. And Shota had to resist a flinch at the kid's harsh tone as the greenette turned to hide his face. And I know for a fact that if you helped, he might not survive the next time. Shota's heart plummeted at the voice crack and the experience laced into the boy's words. He nodded to the kid. Not that he'd see, and retreated to the booth that had a sign reading Shota's booth. He tugged his capture weapon off of his neck, placing it gently on the table with his bag. Sighing, he plopped into the booth as the 4 cats from day 1 surrounded him. He had to prepare all the information on the problem child he could before the meeting with Nezu and Tsukachi tomorrow. Shota stared longingly at the coffee machine, flickering briefly to the kitty cream puffs. He groaned in pain as he sunk into his seat, closing his eyes. Ugh, you are so fucking lucky that you're my favorite hero, Pencil Tip. I honestly thought that you'd at least survive the first 2 days, though. It's really a shame that I can't let you die of coffee deprivation in all your sleep-deprived glory, stated a bored tone. Shota could hear the snarkiness to it. He opened an eye to see Izuku holding out a folded shirt and pants. I'll make your oh-so-precious coffee while you change out back. Don't worry, Kana-sen said it'd be fine. Thanks, problem child. Yeah, Shota. I'm still mad. Izuku rolled his eyes. Now hurry up before I change my mind. I'd bet 100 yen that Tsuki gave you a shit ton of paperwork. A grunt was all the greenette got in reply as the ravenette stood, taking the clothes and stalking off to the employee change rooms. 5 minutes later, Izuku had a shit-eating grin plastered on his face as Shota's cursing graced his ears. Izuku, you fucking pest. The hero yelled as he appeared from the back. He wore a put your hands up radio t-shirt and basic jeans with sewn and cat patterns. Izuku cackled. He fucking lost his ever-loving shit as the pro hero chased him around the cafe, much to the amusement of both the customers and the winged boy. Why, I thought you'd like it, Sho. The little menace taunted over his shoulder. You know I could murder and no one would find the body. Yes, because you would totally get rid of your best source of your life-giving drink, he retorted sarcastically. This continued for around 20 minutes before Shota reluctantly had to do his work for the next day. He received a mug of coffee and a plate of kitty cream puffs from a very smug green menace, though Shota was not about to bite the hand that fed him coffee and snacks from heaven. I hate you, you little green gremlin. He scowled. I love you too, you big, grumpy, sleep-deprived man. Izuku sniggered. Shota stayed the remainder of the day, compiling any information about the kid, and he prayed that said kid wouldn't hack into his computer and destroy his progress. Customers came and went as the sun followed its course, but Shota stayed in the cafe, plowing through a probably unhealthy amount of coffee. It was currently 6 o'clock and the only 2 in the cafe were the cats, Izuku and himself. A movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention and his head lifted up to see Izuku moving out from the counter. Keep watch for a sec for me, please. I'll be back, he stated, rubbing his eye. Shota raised an eyebrow at the boy. Where are you going? My wings feel stiff and they're too big to be spread inside the cafe. The teen yawned and Shota really had to wonder how long the kid actually slept. Humming in response, he watched the boy walk out of the cafe, stopping right outside. He watched as a cloud in the sky shifted slightly so a ray of sunshine landed on Izuku. The way that the kid fully stretched out his wings made him look absolutely stunning. He looked truly angelic. Good morning, Tsukachi Aizawa, greeted the rat. Dog, bear, who knew? Hello, Principal Nezu. Tsukachi spoke, while Shota just nodded tiredly in acknowledgement. So, an interesting, probably case-solving, discovery has been made. Yes, Nezu, Aizawa confirmed. Eraser, I trust that you've compiled the information about the kid, huffed the detective. Pulling out his laptop, he shifted it to face the other 2. 1 month ago, I met a kid working at a cafe. His name is Izuku, no last name, the same day that the pool of blood was found. Your student, also named Izuku, applied for the course that day as well. I've made several connections between my problem child and yours. Later in the week, Emerald and Jade made their debuts. Izuku, under sleep deprivation, directly admitted to being Jade, and I've also tied Jade to Emerald. Not only that, but Emerald sent analysis in order of Izuku's favorite heroes. I was under the impression that Izuku's favorite hero was you. Wasn't Hawk's Emerald's debut? Nezu asked, to which Shota switched tabs to the analysis Emerald had sent him, hours before his supposed debut. Please continue then. Nezu spoke. Then Hawks, and Emerald is yet to do anything for the number 1 and 2 heroes. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 inputted. Shota shrugged. Bad history, apparently. Anywho, yesterday 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 received a missing person report for a boy named Izuku Midoriya, matching the description of Izuku from the cafe. However, he also matched the DNA of the blood found in the middle of the street. What's concerning is how Izuku's aunt, Mitsuki Bakugo, was the one to inform the police of his disappearance, not his mother. And Midoriya can't even remember the last time she'd even interacted with her son. That's already neglect, meaning he can't return to his previous home life. Not only that, Mitsuki Bakugo is the mother of Izuku's bully, and judging by Izuku's reaction, Bakugo went further than just calling him names. So where is Izuku staying now? Asked the detective. Who knows? He's usually quite sandy when he comes in though, and he's always really early, so he must live nearby to the cafe at some place with sand. Shota sighed. Next time you see him, try to get him to meet us so we can arrange something. Frankly, I don't fancy a 14-year-old living God knows where, Nezu ordered sternly. Then a smirk crossed his face. And I'm sure, when it comes, you and Yamada have your emergency fostering license. Yes, Nezu, replied the Erasure hero with a nod. He'd do it even without being told. Fire. Izuku could smell fire. Wait, what the actual fuck? Why was there fire? Izuku shot up. His eyes looked frantically around him, only to have flames filling his vision. Not good. It was morning now, and Izuku had slept at Dagaba Beach again. He'd hidden in his rubbish cave, but now everything was on fire. He expected it to hurt, though. Not for it to feel like a pleasant tickling sensation. Crack. He looked up to see a fallen piece of debris coming straight for him. He needed to move out of the way. Izuku pushed off from the ground, diving out of the path of a falling microwave. There was no doubt in his mind that that would have killed him or left him with serious injuries. Through the fire he could see an opening in the wall of trash, about the size of a small adult, meaning he could probably fit. He lunged for the hole but was stopped by his wing getting caught. His wings didn't fit. Izuku had already accepted the fact that he wasn't affected by the fire. However, he doubted that he was immune to falling debris. So then and there, in neither a stroke of pure genius or pure idiocy, he had the bright idea of dislocating his feathery appendage. Finally free, Izuku tugged once more and scrambled away from the trash inferno. With adrenaline rushing through his veins, the greenette failed to realize how the fire seemed to follow him. That lasted for less than a few minutes. He hissed in pain from the dislocation before looking back at his wings to assess the damage. Imagine the shock when he came to face his wings that were still on fire. Jumping up in panic, he started frantically trying to snuff out the flames that engulfed his wings. After a few minutes, once he'd cooled down and used the analytical side of his brain, Izuku came to several conclusions. Firstly, the fire didn't hurt, and he'd never admit that it took him more than 2 minutes to figure that out. Secondly, after looking closer, he saw that his wings had turned a beautiful ombre of red, orange, and yellow. Thirdly, he could now breathe, create, and manipulate fire. In his panicked state, Izuku had let out a stream of fire and stupidly had somehow become a firebender from the last avatar and used some pyrokinetic abilities to ball up the fire in the air. Fourthly, he could, thankfully, turn it off and on at will. He'd had so much fun lighting up his wings, then snuffing out the flames. The fifth discovery made was after he looked in a somewhat shattered mirror. His eyes turned a sunset orange when he used his flame wings. Similarly, the tips of his hair were orange as well. The sixth thing he found out was that he was immune to his own fire and had a resistance to high heats and other flames to some extent. The final realizations were that his wing was still dislocated and he had to get to work. It was pretty early in the morning. If he had to guess, he'd probably say around 2 a.m. Izuku, having no experience in relocating wings, was stumped. It hurt, but he didn't know how to put it back in place, and he really needed to get to work. So, in another bout of idiocy, but totally something only Izuku Midoriya would do, he sucked it up and continued to the cafe. So apparently, the only sign that tells you a wing is dislocated is that it droops slightly. Honestly, it felt like carrying dead weight on his back, which was really annoying. Why was this not covered in Nezu's class? He'd have to ask about bird anatomy or something. It took Izuku 20 minutes to get ready to open the cafe. Between getting ready and setting up the cafe, leaving him with 10 minutes to spare, he sat behind the counter scribbling his new findings in his notebook. Analysis Notebook Number 14 Entry 1 Wings 2 large green wings around shoulder blade area. Wingspan is around 2.5 times the height of the owner. Person has full control of their wings, can fly and move them at will. The wings are green. Analysis Notebook number 14 Entry 2 Fire wings can be activated at will. If inactive, wings will resume original state. Green wings turn into an ombre of red, orange, and yellow when active. Wings are on fire that doesn't burn the person. Person can breathe, create, and manipulate fire at will. Eyes turn sunset orange along with the tips of person's hair. Izuku sighed as he got up from his seat behind the counter, groaning right after at the realization that he now had nowhere to sleep. Walking up to the door, he was amused to see a familiar dark-haired pro-hero waiting patiently for the cafe to open. Izuku gave his million-watt smile to Eraserhead. But when he opened the door, his smile dropped and was replaced by worry as his sights fell on a large cut across the top of his arm. "Shota," the boy exclaimed worriedly as he led the hero inside. Sitting him down, the greenette went to get his medical supplies, mumbling under his breath something about stitches. In all fairness, it wasn't Eraserhead's fault that he got cut. He had intervened with a trigger deal with around 5 people involved, and one of them just so happened to have an invisibility quirk. Seriously, the kid was overreacting. It wasn't that bad. Okay, maybe it was that bad. It was a pretty deep cut, maybe around 5 to 8 centimeters long. Again, not his fault. He dealt with the deal and dutifully handed them over to the police before escaping the medics. They would surely take him to the hospital, and Shota hated hospitals. They reminded him too much of death and despair. Shota honestly only wanted coffee when he decided to go to the cafe. So when he arrived, it came as a complete surprise when the little green teen that he was looking to adopt sat him down and tended to his wound. Well, not really surprising. He already knew that the kid had a heart of gold. What was it this time? Izuku frowned. Trigger deal. Some guy with an invisibility quirk. He winced slightly as the greenette stitched his wound. How do you know how to do stitches? By learning, obviously. Don't be a smartass and answer the question, the hero said, rolling his eyes. The kid seemed to be amused by the answer because Shota then heard some quiet sniggering. The pair fell into silence before Shota got his answer. I was 8 years old, Izuku stated with a somehow fond tone. I was coming home when a kid from my school noticed me. He chuckled, too bitterly for Shota's liking, before continuing. He had a panther mutation quirk, and let me tell you, panthers sure can cut deeply. And your mother didn't take you to see a hospital? Another bitter chuckle. My mother doesn't give a damn about me, he replied under his breath, more than likely for only himself to hear, rather than the hero. The silence stretched on for what seemed like ever, but probably had only been a couple of minutes. That silence was rightfully broken as Shroud and Shockwave came through the door. And I'm telling you, Snipe totally has a thing for 13. I am willing to bet actual money on it, came the voice of Shockwave. No, Snipe doesn't, stated a very tired-looking Shroud. Too bad for you, Shroud. Shock would win that bet. Snipe and 13 have been married for 3 years. Izuku nodded as he informed the pro of his loss. Izu. Shockwave squealed as he approached Izuku with a hug. It was very childish for a 19-year-old. Izuku expertly ducked under the embrace, careful of the needle halfway through Shota's skin. Shockwave. For the number 11 vigilante in Musutafu, you don't seem to have the awareness to see that I am stitching up Eraser's wound, he scolded the now sheepish-looking vigilante. I would have expected better. Sorry, Zuku. Shockwave shifted on his feet, subtly favoring his left foot over his right, the action not going unnoticed by the greenette who sighed before speaking. Shock, take a seat over there, he pointed. Shroud, you know where the cold packs are. Make sure this idiot uses it. Once the four had settled, the playful chatter had resumed, starting off by picking up what they dropped from the discussion concerning 13's and Snipe's relationship. This was followed by a harsh critique for a Twilight hero who had recently debuted. I am actually serious. There is absolutely no way that this is the right way to use her quirk. Starry's quirk allows her to create a bright yellow, star-shaped barrier. Who in their right mind would use it primarily for offense? It is plain as fucking day that it's for defense. Not only that, but she doesn't even know the basics of fighting. The 3 older men watched on in fondness as the little, cute green boy dissolved into mutterings of the hero. Soon, Shroud and Shockwave had to leave as Shockwave couldn't be seen in public and Shroud can't live on just 2 hours of sleep like a certain Erasure hero. Said Erasure hero stayed in the cafe because he can be seen in public and can live on just 2 hours of sleep, if not less. Once other customers started coming in, Izuku left Shota for his place behind the counter. He watched as the kid took orders with practiced ease, moving around as if it was as easy as breathing. And as he watched, he noticed how his right wing drooped, how he seemed to wince when his wing made contact with anything, and how his shoe was slightly burnt. Shota saw it all. Was it possible to want to adopt this child even more? Yes, it absolutely was. It was closing time and Shota had stayed the entire day again. He watched as the cafe emptied out and the boys started to pack up shop. Shota, Izuku approached him, fiddling slightly with his left wing. We're closing. All right, kiddo, he replied while getting up, much to the protest of the cats who had snuggled up close to him. Izuku opened the door and waited for Shota to follow. Once he exited, Izuku followed suit and locked the door behind him. Bye, show, see you tomorrow. Izuku waved and left. He was about to follow the boy and get him to UA when his phone buzzed, signifying a call. Pulling out his phone, he answered. Hello, this is Shota Aizawa. How can I help you? Sho, how's my lovely husband? Zashi, I'm good. What's up? I got the entire afternoon off. When you coming home? Came the voice of his husband. Shota looked up to see that any trace of the greenette was gone. He sighed, now, but I gotta leave for patrol. Okie dokie, see you at home. See you. And with that, he hung up. Eraserhead leapt from rooftop to rooftop. Cloaked in the darkness of night, he'd taken to patrolling around the cafe's area in hope of finding the problem child somewhere. But apparently, the universe wants to piss off Shota and make Izuku suffer. It was a slow night, Shota only having to stop 1 or 2 muggings, and he was getting very restless. He was annoyed about not being able to get the kid out of his bad situation. And frankly, he was thankful that he didn't accidentally take out his frustration on a villain. Eraser heard thunder in the sky and looked up to see lightning splitting up the Inkai night sky. He groaned as rain soaked him. The universe really did hate him. Shota stopped at the edge of a roof, gaze sweeping over the mostly dormant city for any crime or anyone that he could help. Suddenly, Eraser heard a faint coughing from an alley below him. Shota knew that alleyways were usually inhabited by homeless people and he'd usually leave them be. But the coughing sounded really young and he really couldn't leave a child on the streets. He jumped down with practiced ease, making the smallest splash in a puddle from the rain. Shota froze. In front of him, curled up, was Izuku. One wing was partially sheltering him from the rain, while the other laid splayed out at an odd angle. The kid was ghostly pale and was shivering so much that the puddle of water beneath him was constantly moving. Eraser rushed to the boy's side and shook him slightly more frantically than professional, but he seriously could not give 2 flying fucks right then. Kid, wake up. He didn't move other than the shivering that was currently the only sign that he wasn't dead. Izuku, wake up. The greenette's eyelids fluttered open, squinting from the rain that was no doubt stinging his eyes. The hero let out a breath of relief as Izuku looked at him in confusion. The kid broke out in another fit of coughing, more violent than before, and Shota was reminded of the current situation. Kid, I'm taking you to UA. You aren't safe here, he said as he stood up and helped the kid to his feet. Izuku stuttered slightly in his movements, and it seemed that he wasn't able to stand straight by himself, so Shota let him lean on him. He noticed how his right wing drooped even more than before and how it kinda dragged on the pavement as they walked. It was a very long trek to UA, and he was extremely thankful that he'd called Nezu on the way when they were passing a covered route. In turn, the rat principal called 𝗵𝗲 and recovery girl. All the while, Shota was getting increasingly worried as Izuku was getting more and more sluggish. Show. Suddenly, Izuku fainted, leaving Shota even more distressed. He took the teen in his arms and ran as fast as he could to UA. The door to Nezu's office swung open with a loud bang as Shota rushed to place Izuku on the couch, eyes frantically searching for recovery girl. Shio, he called as his sight landed on the woman. Shio was at Izuku's side in an instant, checking over the boy while shaking Shota down for information. Where did you find him? An alley near Dagaba Beach. He was lying there in the rain, one wing kinda sheltering him while the other just stuck out at a weird angle. He was pale and shaking and he fainted halfway here, he explained in a rush. The healing heroine set down her stethoscope and turned to the others. Well, he seems to be fine other than a fever from the rain and his dislocated wing. Dislocated? Yelled the underground hero. Yes, Shota, dislocated. She responded in an exasperated tone. I can't heal him right now, so we have to wait until he wakes up. Well, this certainly wasn't how I thought this would play out, Nezu mused, earning a glare from the soaked hero. Tsukachi, who was sitting quietly, sighed. Shota, why don't you go and change, then we can talk this out. Shota huffed but stalked out of the office nonetheless, returning half an hour later in another hero costume that was identical to the previous one. He sunk into one of the seats and started sipping on a cup of coffee, grimacing at the taste. This tastes like cardboard. Problem child makes better coffee. I would expect no less from a barista. The principal chuckled before taking a sip of his own tea. The room settled into a silence, broken only by the detective finally talking. It's evident that Izuku isn't in a safe situation. He can't return to his mother. His father is out of the picture and I refuse to send him back to whatever environment he was in before. It was made obvious that the relationship between him and the Bakugas is a bad one. I refuse to let him just be thrown into the system. For one, he's already suffered far too much. Secondly, he was previously quirkless and I'm not taking any chances. Shota spoke, but in the end it's his choice. True. Then we shall wait until he wakes up, Nezu exclaimed. Izuku felt warmer than what should be possible when sleeping in the streets, not to mention more comfortable. His toxic green eyes fluttered open and took a while to adjust to the light, taking in the ceiling. Izuku instantly knew that he, in fact, was not on the streets. He sat straight up with a yelp of pain that shot up his wing. His gaze frantically took in all of his surroundings in hopes that it would point out where he was. It did. Well, he thought it did. I mean, it wasn't really easy to believe that he was on a couch in Nezu's office. His eyes met Nezu's and he stumbled off of the couch into a 90-degree bow. "And Nezu-sensei," he squeaked out, cursing internally at the pain in his right wing. Before Nezu was able to reply, however, the greenette was gently pushed back onto the couch by a little old lady in a doctor coat. "Now, dearie, you shouldn't be moving that wing of yours around while it's dislocated. You should have enough stamina for me to heal you, though." Izuku had stars in his eyes as he drew a sharp intake of breath. "Oh my god. Your recovery girl, the youthful heroine. The one and only, dear." She smiled before using her quirk to heal his injury and fever. She was shocked to see not even the slightest change to the boy, apart from the healed wing. "Dearie, how long do you usually sleep?" To his credit, Izuku at least had the decency to look sheepish as he answered, "Like 1 or 2 hours. This, in turn, resulted in the greenette receiving a whack to his head. "That is not nearly as much rest as you should be getting." "Well, I mean, I have insomnia, so." The lady gave an exasperated sigh and walked back to the seat she'd previously been in. "Young Izuku, how nice it is to see you in person. I must say that I am a bit disappointed that I wasn't the one to discover your identity," stated Nezu. "Oh, sorry, Nezu-sensei." The principal chuckled at that. No, none of that. "In fact, I am impressed that you could hide it from me for this long." Thank you, sir." Izuku's eyes swept over the room once again, this time slower, and landed on the 2 others in the room. "Suki," he exclaimed excitedly. Tsukachi got up from his seat and approached the kid, his hand out for a handshake. "Hello, Jade. Call me Izuku," the greenette replied, shaking his hand. Izuku then turned to face the black-haired hero who had practically teleported next to the detective with a blinding smile. "Hey, Hey, kid," Shota greeted with a small smile as he ruffled Izuku's fluffy, green hair. "Wow, Shota, you really do have a soft spot for the kid," the detective teased with a snicker. Shut up, 𝗵𝗲𝗄, he said to Tsukachi, trying and failing to hide the creeping blush in his capture weapon, to which the other man doubled down in laughter. "Izuku, we'd like to discuss some things with you, is that okay?" asked Shota. Izuku nodded in agreement and Shota continued. "We are aware of your living situation and we've decided that you can't continue living like you can't send me back." The greenette yelled in fear, cutting the hero off. However, Shota just knelt down in front of him with a small, kind smile and spoke. "We won't. We know that your mom was neglecting you, and frankly, we want to put her in jail. We also know that the Bakugas are supposed to be your guardians if something happened to your parents. But you said supposed to." "Indeed. We are aware that the relationship between you and the Bakugas is a bad one, so you won't be going there." "So where am I going?" he asked. "Well, you have 3 options," Nezu started. "First option you have is the foster system. I'm sure that you know what that implies." Izuku nodded. "Your second option is a group home," he continued. Another nod. "And your last option is to be a ward of UA." At this, Izuku gained a look of confusion and tilted his head that was far too cute to be possible. "What's that?" "It's where a UA staff member with an emergency fostering license fosters a child. It's usually just short-term fostering, but it can also be long-term like adoption. In your case, however, if you pick this option it'll be just adoption," explained Shota. "The choice is up to you, Izuku," Tsukachi added. There was a long pause where Izuku weighed the pros and cons of each option before he answered, "I want to be a ward of UA." "Wonderful," Nezu exclaimed as he clapped his hands together. "You'd usually go with your homeroom teacher, but since you aren't a student I'll place you in the care of Shota and Hisashi." Izuku stared at Shota in surprise, tears slowly welling. At this, the underground hero immediately thought he'd made a mistake to make the teen hate him and quickly started freaking out. Why you don't need to go with us if you don't want to." "And damn did that hurt, Shota. You can be placed with," and he was cut off by a green blur barreling into him, arms wrapping tightly around him and a muffled, watery voice saying, "You'd really want me." Shota's panic died down, replaced by a small smile as he replied, "Of course, kid. Of course I'd want you. You're kind and lovely and bright and sometimes a little gremlin. Of course I'd want you." The kid broke out into sobs that they could only assume were happy sobs, clutching onto Shota like his life depended on it. The other merely wrapped his arms around the boy and held him tight as if he'd never see the teen again if he let go. He spoke sweet nothings to him and rubbed circles into his back as to comfort him. Once both had calmed, green eyes met black as the hero started to speak. "Listen, Izuku, you are a great kid who was dealt the worst hand. Yet you kept playing, regardless of how bad your cards were. And that is the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. If the kids at your old school didn't see it, it's their loss. If the teachers at your old school didn't see it, it's their loss. If your parents didn't see it, it's their loss. If anyone else doesn't see it, it is their loss." Izuku, tears still streaming down his cheeks, buried his face in the crook of Shota's neck. "Thank you. No problem, kiddo. None at all. Shota is tired. Again, when is he not? Anyway, 𝗧𝗪 is tired. He's in Nezu's office, doing paperwork, with his kid in his lap who is now resting. That's right, his kid. 𝗧𝗪 chuckles softly under his breath as he looks down fondly at the mop of green hair. He'd give this kid the love he was robbed of and more. I've finished the adoption papers, Nezu, he stated as he let out a sigh and looked at the principal. Nezu looked up from his paperwork to meet 𝗧𝗪's gaze before responding in voice that was far too cheery for the time. Great. Why don't you head home now? I think 𝗵𝗲𝗏 is waiting for you. I'll excuse you and 𝗵𝗲𝗏 from your teaching duties for the next week to get Izuku settled in. Thanks, 𝗧𝗪 thanked before picking up his phone from the table. 𝗧𝗫𝗧𝗫, 𝗧𝗪, when you coming home? 𝗧𝗫, 𝗧𝗪, are you okay? 𝗧𝗫, did something happen? 𝗧𝗫, please answer your text. 𝗧𝗪, 𝗧𝗫, I'm fine. 𝗧𝗫, 𝗧𝗪. 𝗧𝗫, why aren't you home? 𝗧𝗫, what happened? 𝗧𝗫, are you okay? 𝗧𝗪, calm down. I'm fine. 𝗧𝗪, I'll explain when I get home, but can you please get some clothes for a 12-year-old? Preferably pajamas. 𝗧𝗫, sure 𝗧𝗪. Thanks 𝗧𝗫, you're welcome. My lovely husband. 𝗧𝗪 stared down at the last text, a small smile curling his lips, then at the mop of viridian curls. Kid, wake up. We gotta go, he said gently. Izuku stirred and opened his eyes, squinting at the light. 𝗧𝗪, good morning. Morning. We gotta get going. Where? Home. The jangling of keys in the keyhole broke through the silence of the night, followed shortly after by the figure of Shota Aizawa pushing open the door and walking inside the apartment, a small greenette shuffling in closely behind. Welcome to your new home, problem child. Shota spoke after toeing off his boots, Izuku copying his movements, although a bit neater than Shota had. Shota, called a voice that Izuku had heard many times over the radio. He tilted his head up and his viridian eyes caught sight of a familiar blonde-haired voice. Hero. Present Mike, he whispered softly, only heard by the Ravenet hero whose eyes flickered for a second to Izuku before going to his husband. Shota, who's the little listener? Present Mike asked, confusion and tiredness evident in his voice. Shota sighed before introducing his husband to the kid and the kid to his husband. 𝗧𝗪, meet Izuku. He's the newest ward of UA and we'll be adopting him. Izuku, meet 𝗧𝗪. He's my husband and your other guardian. Adopting. 𝗧𝗪 whisper screamed, a little bit of his quirk leaking into the stuttered word, and Izuku guiltily looked down, ready to apologize, before the blonde spoke again. And here I thought that I'd be the one to first approach the topic of kids. Izuku's head shot up in shock. Why, you're not mad? Huh, why would I be mad, little listener? I've wanted a kid of our own since like a year into me and 𝗧's marriage. Shota snorted in amusement of 𝗧𝗪 having kept quiet about wanting a kid for over 2 years. Wow, 𝗧𝗪, 2 years. He chuckled before turning to Izuku. Izuku, you're moving into the guest room. It's the last room on the left of the hall over there. 𝗧𝗪 has probably put a pair of pajamas on the bed for you so you can go have a shower. Help yourself to whatever you want. The bathroom is the one right across from your room. Oh, okay. The greenette nodded before bowing. Thank you for taking me in. And if Shota saw a drop of water that dropped onto the floor, he doesn't say a thing. No problem, little green bean. 𝗧𝗪 cheered as he gave 2 thumbs up to the boy. Yeah, kid, Shota added, it's our pleasure. Izuku straightened out, gaze locked onto the floor as he made his way to the aforementioned room. Watching the kid disappear around the corner, both men turned to each other, a silent conversation held between the two by eye contact until Shota looked away, sighing heavily. Yeah, I'll tell you. Let's just go make something to eat first. Okay. 𝗧𝗪 turned around and made his way to the kitchen, Shota trailing behind. I think onigiri sounds good, ya dig? The little listener should be able to eat that right. I don't really think that he'd be allergic to rice. Yeah, I think that'll be good, he answered, getting out a big plate. There was a silence that was neither comfortable nor tense. 𝗧𝗪 stopped what he was doing and turned to face Shota, as though the quiet atmosphere was too unbearable for him. Why exactly is Izuku a ward of UA? He's not even in the school. I mean, don't get me wrong, the listener is great, it's just, yeah, I know what you mean. Izuku was quirkless until a few weeks ago. As far as we've gathered without the direct input of the kid. He was tormented by his peers, maybe his teachers, and neglected by his mother, his dad being 𝗵𝗲𝗏 throughout all of it. He explained. Quirkless, murmured 𝗧𝗪 under his breath. Shota had faced a lot of discrimination when he was younger for his villainous quirk, and 𝗧𝗪 having also suffered because of his quirk as well. Yep, a mop of damp green hair appeared from around the corner and both heroes turned to look at the teen. And you don't have a shirt on, why? Questioned Shota, eyebrow raised. I need scissors, he answered shyly, shifting nervously. The underground pro face palmed before speaking. How could I forget? Your wings. Come here. Izuku shuffled to the black-haired man who had grabbed a pair of scissors from a drawer. Where's your shirt? He asked, and Izuku held up a lavender-gray shirt. He then proceeded to take the shirt and cut 2 holes for the greenette's wings to fit through. There you go, kiddo. Shota handed back the shirt, which was then quickly put on. Thank you, he murmured. With a blinding smile, Hisashi said, "Come sit, little listener, we made onigiri." The teen did as told and took a seat next to Shota at the counter, nearly dying of fright when something brushed past his legs. "Back," he yelped. Hisashi started laughing and Shota snorted. "That'll be one of the cats," he explained, picking up a black tuxedo cat with white socks. "This is Coffee. He's a pretty good cat that likes nearly anyone he comes into contact with." Hisashi, who had left moments before, returned with 2 cats in hand. "This one," he started, slightly lifting the pure white cat, "is Cream. She's kind of old but she's great nonetheless. The last one," Shota spoke, motioning to the 3rd cat, white flecked with brown and gray, "is Sugar. Ironically enough, she's not as sweet as her name may suggest. She's demonic and hates nearly everyone." Nodded Hisashi, setting down the 2 cats that immediately swarmed around Izuku, Sugar leaping up and setting down on Izuku's lap. Shota chuckled at the sight. "Looks like you got the stamp of approval." Hisashi sat beside Shota and pulled out his phone, tapping a few times before speaking up. "So, Izuku, our friend is coming with us tomorrow to get you some stuff. That all right?" The greenette hummed in thought before responding. "Who's the friend?" he asked. "𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗵𝗲, though you might know her better as Midnight." He cut the blonde off. Both men blinked then stared in mild surprise and amusement. "That's right, little listener. She's such an amazing heroine. I've worked with her at least 20 times with the amount of time she patrols during the night. I can't believe I get to meet her in person." Izuku rambled happily. Shota nodded in agreement. "Yep, she's great hero, though I think you'll be meeting a lot more heroes than her in the future. But before we go shopping with 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄, we're taking you to see 𝐒𝐻𝐢. You need a checkup regarding your health. That includes your mental state too." "Problem child?" Pouting, Izuku nodded in agreement, however reluctant it may be. "Will I still be able to work at the cafe?" "I don't see why not, little listener. As far as I know, you're smart as hell and don't go to school, so I'm not concerned about your education." Hisashi shrugged. "Nezu said that he wants you to come to UA to sit in on lessons and take private lessons from the teachers and the rat god himself. I think you should only take weekend shifts," stated Shota, not looking up from his coffee that had appeared from seemingly nowhere. "Okay, I'll tell Kana-san. Apart from your lessons at UA, Zashi and I want to train you for next year," Shota informed as he took a sip of his 3rd, 4th, 5th coffee. Izuku started tearing up. Really?" The hero placed a hand on the kid's hair and ruffled the bushy mess. "Yeah, kid. Can I still continue my Jade and Emerald activities?" he asked eagerly. "Sure." Hisashi shrugged. "You're doing more good than bad. If anything, we should be encouraging you. Your work is awesome, you dig." "Yeah," giggled Izuku, "I dig. That's what I'm talking about, little listener," smiled the voice hero. There was a comfortable moment before Hisashi talked again. Kiddo," Hisashi started, continuing at the hesitant nod from the greenette. "Where were you staying after leaving your mother's house? Surely you can't have been sleeping in alleyways this entire time." She's not my mother. She stopped being my mother the day I got my diagnosis and she stopped calling me her son," Izuku stated bitterly. "Sorry, listener," he apologized. "And no, it's fine. Not your fault," Izuku mumbled. "Don't worry, I wasn't camping out in alleys for a month. I found this little cubby at Dagaba Beach. It was just last night because I accidentally set it on fire with a new aspect of my quirk." "And how exactly do wings cause fire?" asked Shota, an eyebrow raised, and Izuku got up from his seat before activating fire wings on only his left wing. "This is how," he explained, unhelpfully as he fiddled with an orange feather. "Listener, you'll burn yourself." He trailed off. Absent-mindedly, Izuku gently blew a small stream of fire onto his palm and watched the flame jump across his hand. He looked up, allowing the 2 others to see his now sunset orange eyes, before flashing them a bright smile. "Don't worry, it doesn't hurt." "That is so cool." "Indeed." Hisashi gave a high-pitched squeal. "Listener, your hair is amazing like this." Izuku giggled before deactivating the flames and sitting back down. "I have an analysis of it in the cafe, if you'd like it." "Sure, Izuku. That'd actually help a lot for your training," agreed Shota. On another note, he started, "You are aware that the 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄 are looking for you, correct?" The teen stiffened slightly before nodding. "Yes, I know." He paused. "Will you tell them that I've been found?" "Sadly, yes," Shota stated, a little harshly, though both Hisashi and Izuku suspected that it was because of the 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄. "We'll tell them that you've been found, but we'll also tell them that you've already been adopted." "What about 𝐒𝐭?" Izuku asked, caution in his tone. "Well, with all of the evidence against her, we're looking to arrest her. Suki has already started up a case." "What about the listener's father?" Hisashi questioned. "Absent. He left after my diagnosis." The teen spoke in a flat tone. "Suki has started a case to find him," Shota inputted before smirking. "And Nezu is gonna burn 𝗲𝗲𝗏 to the ground for what they did to you. What they did was unforgivable." Izuku's eyes widened and his arms wrapped around Shota's neck as he hugged him, thanking him profusely. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Shota pat Izuku on the back while Hisashi stood and went to hug Izuku as well. Briefly, Izuku wondered if this was what it would have been like for his family if he wasn't quirkless. Would 𝐭 have loved him? Would Hisashi have stayed? Would Bakugo have stayed friends with him? It's fine, kid. You're fine. We're okay. Hisashi spoke softly. They stayed like that for a while longer before Hisashi pulled away from the hug and ushered them to bed. Once Izuku was happily tucked into bed, Shota and Hisashi went to their room and did the same. Shota waking up at midnight was not an uncommon occurrence. This is why he wasn't surprised when he woke up a little before 1 a.m. next to his still sleeping husband in near complete darkness. Nor was he surprised when he had the sudden want for a jelly packet. So, he carefully dislodged himself from Hisashi's grasp and stalked out of the room. The hero was surprised, however, to hear faint sobbing emanating from the room that was, as of 3 hours ago, Izuku's. He quietly made his way towards the room and opened the door. Izuku was asleep, curled up on the bed, blanket forgotten, with his wings wrapped protectively around him. The way that he was trembling and crying in his sleep made it obvious to Shota that he was having a nightmare. A bad one, too. He walked in and sat on the bed, next to the shaking boy, sighing before speaking. "Izuku," he said, a hand extending to pat the green bush of hair. "Whatever you're dreaming about or remembering, it's not true. You're out of that place. You're safe and you're with us. Hisashi and me and Kana-san and everyone else. You are safe." Amidst his little speech, Izuku had stopped trembling and his sobs had reduced to small sniffles, making Shota feel at least a bit relieved that he was helping him. "Do you want a hug?" Izuku nodded slightly and the Ravenet sat closer to wrap the kid in a hug. "Want to talk about it?" No reply. "That's fine. You don't have to. 𝐼𝐴 she locked me out th the hus when I was S6. IW was really SC scared. And in Kak Bakugo found me in an alley and beat me up W with some other K kids." Izuku stuttered through hiccups and choked sobs, leaning into the hug. "I have no doubt in my mind that would be scary. You're very brave for getting through that, Izuku." Shota comforted. "I am sorry. I'm being silly. ISH shouldn't be so scared. It wasn't even that bad and it was a long time ago. You aren't being silly. It's perfectly normal to have nightmares about traumatic experiences." He paused a moment. "Izuku, do you want to know a secret?" Sure. Zashi and I have nightmares, too." "Really?" the greenette whispered. "Yeah." He nodded. "In our second year at UA we had a friend named Aburo Shirakumo. He was killed during a work studies. We never really recovered from that and we still have nightmares about that day." But that's different. That's your friend's death. That's a really scary thing," argued Izuku. Shota huffed. This clearly wasn't working. "Okay. Izuku, do you know what my quirk is?" Confused, Izuku answered, "Yeah. It's erasure. You can erase quirks. How do you think people would react to someone who could take away something that is really important to them?" They'd be scared." "Yeah, they'd be scared. When I was a kid, everyone called me a villain and they'd be really mean to me. They bullied me, kinda like how those kids bullied you. Except the kids called me villainous instead of quirkless and they'd blindfold me so as couldn't use my quirk to take theirs away." But you're not a villain, you're a hero. And why you don't take quirks away, you just temporarily erase them," Izuku reasoned. "But I wasn't a hero then," he pointed out. "I guess. But what about Hisashi? Does he have nightmares too?" "Yeah, kid. He does. People were scared of his powerful quirk and how he could hurt them, so they made him wear a muzzle. Point is, everyone has nightmares. Not everyone has trauma, but everyone has nightmares." "Oh, do you want me to stay with you tonight?" Shota asked. "Why, yes please." He nodded and hesitated before adding, "Can we watch cat videos until we fall asleep?" Shota smiled. "Sure, kid." Hisashi woke up to the morning light seeping through the curtain lights and Cream sleeping peacefully beside him, unperturbed by the rays of light bathing parts of the room. Something was wrong. Shota never woke up before him and with that in mind, he got up and out of the room to look for his husband. He rubbed the sleep out of his eye and halfway through a yawn, his sight caught on the cracked open door of Izuku's room. He stopped outside of the door, wanting to check on the little green bean, and opened it. Hisashi's eyes fell on the cutest thing he'd ever seen in the entirety of his life. There, in front of him, was Shota and Izuku cuddling together. Izuku's head was tucked into Shota's side while Shota's hand rested on Izuku's hair, more than likely from falling asleep while patting the boy's fluffy green hair, and his other hand held his phone which kept alternating between low battery and cute cat videos. He quickly fumbled for his phone and suppressed a giggle when he snapped a few pictures. Even more so, when all of the cats decided that the best thing to do at the moment was join the photos. As Sugar crawled under Shota's arm, the dark-haired man started to stir and cracked open an eye, making Hisashi try to quiet his cackles and snap even more pictures as his husband Death glared him. "Show," he wheezed, barely containing laughs. "Death glares don't work when you're buried in cats and cuddling with your adorable son. Delete the photos." Shota growled back as he resumed patting Izuku's green curls. Hisashi doubled over in silent laughter. "Shota, you can't do this. Threats don't work like this, let alone when you accompany them with such adorable actions. Shota huffed in annoyance, though Ħazashi could hear the nearly concealed fondness. Fine. Whatever. Just send me the photos. It's about time I change my lock screen. Anyway. The blonde fell to the floor, clutching his stomach while he laughed like a hyena. So much so that Izuku let out a whine and started waking up, stretching his arms and wriggling out of Shota's grasp. Ħazashi, you woke up the broccoli child, scolded the underground pro. Sorry, little listener. Ħazashi apologized, getting up from the floor and pulling the winged boy into a hug. Coffee, came the muffled reply while Izuku wrapped his arms around Ħazashi's waist, making Shota chuckle. Shota, how dare you try poison our beautiful child with that deadly liquid you call coffee? He gasped in mock offense. Izuku wriggled out of Ħazashi's hug and stated, coffee is an elixir of life sent down from a place far higher than the heavens, before simply walking out of the room, leaving the two speechless adults. Shota grinned and agreed silently with the teen while his husband gripped his shoulders and shook him back and forth while whining. Shota, look what you've done to the cinnamon roll. I have no doubt in my mind that Izuku can make delicious tea as well, Ħazashi, he stated, while removing himself from Ħazashi's hold to follow his problem kid to the kitchen, where he probably had gone to make some coffee. He entered the kitchen, Ħazashi following behind, and found Izuku moving around the coffee machine with practiced ease from his time in the cafe. The kid caught sight of the two and gave them a sunshine smile before handing over a mug of tea to Ħazashi. Thanks, little listener. Ħazashi thanked, taking the mug and taking a sip. How? He asked in wonder and confusion. How? What? Questioned Shota. The listener knows how to do my favorite tea. It's like if I made it, Ħazashi said in amazement. How? Shota queried, this time directed to the boy. I remember you saying it in an interview with Hawks in his early hero days, 2 years ago. You were discussing favorite tea types and you basically gave instructions on how to make your favorite type of tea, explained Izuku, who now handed Shota his own mug of steaming coffee. How do you even remember that? Ħazashi asked in wonder. Izuku just shrugged and responded, I've got this pre-quirk thing called photographic memory, also known as eidetic memory. It's kinda like an instant memory quirk. Basically, I can remember things perfectly and recall them at any given moment, as well as being able to glance over something and remembering it forever. It's pretty cool and useful, except for traumatic experiences. That is, the room grimaced at that, unhappy at the implications of the last part of the statement. Nevertheless, the tension seemed to be ineffective to the cats who were willing to help lighten the mood via sugar jumping into Izuku's arms. Shota sighed, willing to push aside the tenseness to get on with the morning. He walked over to the fridge and opened it before looking for any potential ingredients for breakfast. We're having leftover pancakes, he stated while pulling out a container that Izuku could guess held the mentioned pancakes. Izuku tilted his head in confusion, looking like a confused puppy, before speaking his mind. I didn't take you for someone who'd eat Western food. Ħazashi teaches English classes at UA and has an undying love for anything Western, ranging from food to movies to music, you name it. Shota informs in a fond tone for his husband, as he retrieved the now warm pancakes from the microwave. Izuku turned to Ħazashi. Yamada-san, could you please help me with my English? I was quite good when I was young, though I might have gotten a bit rusty. Beaming, Ħazashi replied, of course, listener. Though, you don't have to call me Yamada. Ħazashi is perfectly fine with me. Izuku tilted his head down, hiding his green eyes behind equally green curls and shook his head. I don't think I'll be able to call you that. My father's name was Ħazashi. They're just too similar for me. Sorry. Hey, no, kiddo. It's totally fine, Izuku. I totally dig what you're getting at. How about you call me Ħazashi instead? That cool for you? The loud blonde offered. Oh, okay. The brunette nodded, somewhat hesitant, but nodded nonetheless. The rest of the morning passed without further hassle, and soon the three are pulling up at UA and making their way up to the school's infirmary to see Recovery Girl. It doesn't take too long to make their way to the infirmary, and when they do, Ħazashi opens the door to allow them inside. Hello, you three. Recovery Girl greets. Morning, Chiyo. Grumbles Shota, evidently still tired. Ħazashi, being more awake than his husband, replies in a more peppy tone. Good morning, Chiyo. How are you today? The woman chuckles at the sparkly attitude of the man. I'm good, Yamada. She then turns to the youngest of the room. Hello, dearie. I'm Recovery Girl, but you can call me Chiyo. Do you know why you're here? Izuku bows to the heroine. Hi, Chiyo-san. I am Izuku. It's really nice to meet you. He straightens up from the bow before speaking again. And yeah, Shota and Ħazashi said that you're gonna do a health checkup on me. Right you are. Why don't you go sit on that bed over there and we can start? He nods before walking over to the bed and sitting down. Okay, first up, does anything hurt? I know I healed you last night, but there should still be a fair amount of pain. No, there's no pain. Izuku trailed off before looking down, frowning and looking like he wanted to continue. Are you sure, listener? Ħazashi tried. Well, I think the bullying must have done something to me. It's like I can't feel it. His frown deepened and his eyebrows furrowed. I dunno. Shota then remembered the first day they met, and it pointed to a reason that was very likely to be possible. 𝐂𝐲, how much pain would a person be in if they broke their wrist? She raised an eyebrow in question. Enough pain to rush to the hospital? Why? And would they be able to continue their job for nearly the entire day? It depends on what they do. He narrowed his eyes at the kid. Say they worked at a cafe. No, they wouldn't be able to work with that much pain. She answered. How would that injury feel like compared to being stabbed in the hand? The stab would be more painful than the broken wrist, but only by a little. Aizawa, why are you? Izuku, still insistent on staring holes into the ground, failed to see Shota approaching him. He only looked up when both 𝐂𝐲 and 𝐬𝐵 sucked in a sharp breath of air in shock. Only then did he realize what had happened. As I thought, Shota mumbled under his breath. Shota, you stabbed him in the hand. What the hell? 𝐬𝐵 screamed, his quirk seeping into his panicked yells. Izuku, don't you feel it? I mean, that's a lot of blood, even for a pocket knife. 𝐂𝐲 asked. Huh, he said dumbly, though he soon understood when he raised his hand to see a small pocket knife stabbed through his hand, blood trickling down. No, I don't really feel it. Actually, it's kind of itchy. He's got a high pain tolerance. Alarmingly high. Shota stared bluntly as if he hadn't just stabbed his kid. 𝐂𝐲 sighed. Dear Lord, you're just problems after problems. Here, dearie, I'll heal you up. He nodded his assent. I'm sorry for troubling you. He mumbled after 𝐂𝐲 had used her quirk. Nonsense. It's you, Dad, who should be apologizing. Not you. Don't apologize for getting stabbed. She glared at Shota before her softening her gaze at Izuku. 𝗵𝗃. 𝐂𝐲 shooed the two adults out of the room, but by the end of the checkup, 𝐂𝐲 was frowning far too much for Shota and 𝐬𝐵's liking. Their suspicions only being confirmed when the old lady directs them into the hall outside the infirmary to talk. The two followed her out, leaving Izuku to take a small nap from 𝐂𝐲's quirk side effect. So, what's with the kid? Asked Shota, frown matching 𝐂𝐲's. It isn't pretty, Aizawa. He's got too many problems for a kid his age. She said grimly, he's too underweight, for one. You'll have to start at a meal portion he can stomach, which hopefully isn't that small, and just work your way up to a normal amount. Okay, we can do that. 𝐬𝐵 nodded slowly. Well, on the lighter end of the spectrum, there's his insomnia and pain tolerance that we can't really help. 𝐂𝐲 informed. Other than that, well, everything is seriously alarming. He's got multiple scars that range from what look like to be small explosions to cuts and other things. Yeah, he said it was from the bullying he went through in middle school, though some may be from his mother. Shota stated. There's a really big scar. It's a fire burn that starts at his lower back and covers most of his left chest. It also wraps around his shoulders. And another that I'm not too sure on. It's a barely noticeable palm-sized scar behind his right ear that I can really only describe as cracked glass. It's as if cracks just branched out in any direction from the middle. I've never seen anything like it. So we don't know where it's from? Asked 𝐬𝐵. No, we don't, she replied. And the x-rays? Questioned Shota from his place against the wall. Well, under the scar on his head, his skull looks like it's been fractured, but it isn't very noticeable. Other than that, there's a few places that look like they've been broken but have healed themselves over time. All right, that's all? Asked Shota. That's everything. There's nothing more to worry about, besides all I've mentioned, she confirmed. 𝐬𝐵 sighed. Well, that is a lot. It is, Shota agreed. He's really living up to the nickname, isn't he? That really isn't a good thing. 𝐬𝐵 deadpanned. Yeah, I know. He sighed and pulled out his phone to check the time. Anyway, we should get home so we can have lunch before 𝗵𝗏 comes to go shopping. All right, let's grab the little listener and hit the road. 𝐬𝐵 cheered, running inside the room to get said listener. He's probably really hungry. Shota turned to 𝐂𝐲 and spoke. Thanks, 𝐂𝐲. Sorry for the trouble. It's nothing, except for the stabbing part. That was very stupid, she scolded, whacking him on the head with her cane. Yeah, I won't do it again. 𝐬𝐵 walked back out, joining the two, followed by Izuku, who yawned away the remnants of his nap. Are we going home? He asked. Yep, we're gonna have lunch and then we're gonna go shopping with 𝗵𝗏 for your stuff. 𝐬𝐵 answered excitedly. Thanks again, 𝐂𝐲. The loud hero yelled over his shoulder as he grabbed the other two and started off to the car. 𝗂𝐲 could only smile at the retreating forms of the small family. It wasn't long before the family had made it home and finished lunch, Izuku only being able to stomach a small portion like 𝗂𝐲 had said. The three settled on the couch, the smallest getting sandwiched between his guardians while the cats took it upon themselves to include themselves in the cuddles. One pre-Quirk Avengers movie later. And the sound of rapid knocking could be heard from behind the door. Shota sighed as he got up, stretched then yawned. I'll get it, it's probably Nym. Come on, listener, come meet 𝗵𝗏. Well, formally at least. This time it isn't through comms. 𝐬𝐵 stood up and followed his husband out to greet their friend, Izuku trailing behind. 𝗵𝗏 greeted 𝐬𝐵 as he ran to hug his friend. How are you? Hi, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I've been great, though a little birdie told me that you and �‌𝐻𝐸 have added a little one to your family, returned 𝗵𝗲, hugging 𝗧𝗵𝗲 back. Wow, came a deadpan voice from behind the two. I must be a ghost because she went straight past me to hug my husband. Something, or rather someone, tugged at his sleeve and he looked down to see Izuku looking down at his feet. The kid hugged him. Shota chuckled at the greenette's antics, ruffling the green, messy curls. Thanks, kiddo, at least my son can remember my presence, unlike some extroverted people I know, he said, narrowing his eyes at said extroverts who were now cooing over the kid still hugging him. Oh my god, is this the kid? He's so adorable, 𝗵𝗲 squealed, absolutely ecstatic at the prospect. Shota sighed. Yes, Nem, this is the kid. He tapped Izuku's shoulder and the winged boy turned to somewhat face the heroine, shifting nervously from foot to foot and not meeting the woman's gaze. Izuku, meet our friend, 𝗵𝗲𝗂𝐵, otherwise known as Midnight. 𝗵𝗲, this is our kid. Izuku, he's a UA ward as of last night and has been adopted by 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and myself. Izuku bowed at 𝗵𝗲. It's nice to meet you in person, he said before straightening up again. Oh, you're absolutely so cute. Though, what do you mean by in person? She questioned, not aware that the green bean in front of her was in fact Jade and Emerald. Oh yeah, I wouldn't suppose you'd know, would you? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 chipped in, effectively inserting himself into the conversation. The little listener here is actually someone you've met before? Well, kinda. Nem, Izuku is not only Emerald, but he's Jade as well. You've worked with him before. OMG. Really? You're them? That's so cool. And you're so loud. Shota cut her off with a quirk-assisted glare. Dear Lord, Sho, why do you even try at this point? I don't feel threatened by your quirky glares anymore. You're literally just giving yourself dry eye for no reason. 𝗵𝗲 rolled her sky blue eyes in exasperation. You are scaring him, the man growled, uncaring of her previous statement. She turned back to look at the broccoli child who was now a couple steps away from where he'd previously stood and trembling. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. Can you give me a second chance, please? I'd really like to get to know you better. But you don't have to if you don't want to, okay? 𝗵𝗲 spoke, her apology sounding so sincere and calm. It's fine, mumbled Izuku. Thank you, it really means a lot, she said, smiling. So, I'm 𝗵𝗲𝗂𝐵, but you can call me Aunt 𝗵𝗲 cause these two are your dads. I like the color purple in cats. In fact, I have a cat back at home named Sushi. Izuku. I like the color green in cats too, but I also like birds and coffee and heroes, replied the greenette. Tell you what, whenever 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Sho get me to look after you when they can't, I can bring you to my home and you can meet Sushi and we'll have loads of fun. I'm gonna be the coolest auntie and then we're gonna be the coolest auntie and nephew duo ever. Okay, agreed Izuku, finally looking up and smiling back at her. Alright, 𝗵𝗲 cheered and pumped a fist into the air. I'm so happy that I get a little nephew to spoil. I can take you out for ice cream. You like ice cream, right? What's your favorite flavor? Mint and choc chip, he answered, smile brightening. Me too. I've been trying to tell your dads that it's a great flavor but they won't believe me. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 likes mango and Sho likes cookies and cream. They're nice flavors but I don't think anything will ever beat mint and chocolate, Auntie Nem. Izuku nodded. Oh my god, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Sho, did you hear that? He called me Auntie Nem. That was so adorable, she squealed in delight. Yeah, we heard. Though I think it might be time we go, or otherwise we'll be there into the night. Shota chuckled at the two. Okie dokie. Come on, Izuku, let's go so we can spoil you. 𝗵𝗲 all but ushered the three out of the house and into her car. When they got there, 𝗵𝗲 led them to the first shop that sold clothes. Izuku marveled at the clothes that were made to work around any quirk needs, mumbling about the different quirks, while his aunt just watched on in fondness and amusement. His dads went up to one of the store workers to ask for shirts to suit Wings. The two approached a teenage-looking girl with periwinkle blue hair that went below her knees who was sorting out a few clothes. She wore the store's uniform, a white shirt and blue shorts along with a name tag reading 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝗏. Hey listener, could you please help us find? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 trailed off with his questions as the girl turned to face them, revealing a familiar teen. Oh look, Sho. She's one of your second years. 𝗲𝗏, it's nice to see you here, greeted Shota in his monotone voice. Yamada-sensei, Aizawa-sensei, it's nice to see you too. And is that Midnight-sensei too? Who is that with her? 𝗲𝗏 spoke in rapid succession. Greetings and questions thrown haphazardly. Yes, 𝗲𝗏, that's Midnight. The problem kid with her is ours though, she's just his aunt. His name is Izuku. Yes, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and I are together. No, the kid is not biologically ours. Yes, he's adopted. No, Midnight is not our biological sister. Yes, you may tell 𝗬𝗏𝗏 and 𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. No, you can't tell any other students, he stated, answering the questions he knew she was bound to ask. Mirio owes me 1,000 yen. I knew you guys were together, though I didn't think you'd have a kid, she exclaimed triumphantly. Shota rubbed his temple. Being social was tiring. 𝗲𝗏𝗏, you shouldn't be betting with your friends. And Izuku only became a ward of UA last night. Tell that to Mirio. I'm 1,000 yen richer, giggled the girl. Shuu, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 called Nimiri. What's taking you so long? Me and the green bean are running out of things to do. You're not making out in an aisle, are yo, little Hado. Watcha doin' here? Hado grinned evilly. Senseis, do you make out in shop aisles often? Hazashi sputtered and turned a tomato red. Nimiri cackled wildly. Izuku, who was holding his aunt's hand, also had to stifle his laughter. Shota, however, activated his quirk. Hado, I will put you in detention for the rest of the year. And no, we've never made out in a shop aisle. Though the menacing effect was drastically decreased by the blush the man ape. Sorry, sensei, she squeaked, scared of both her teacher and the threat. So, what can I do for you? We need help finding clothes for people with wing quirks, little Hado, answered Nimiri. Okay, Midnight Sensei. Right this way. Hado started off, down the aisle. Hado, sweetie, you can drop the Midnight Sensei when I'm not teaching you. Just call me Kayama-san. And these two you can just call Aizawa-san and Yamada-san. Okie dokie, Kayama-san. Hado agreed, then turned to Izuku. You're Izuku-kun, right? Izuku nodded. That's so cool. I never would have thought that Sensei would have a kid. How old are you? I am 14. Cool. I'm actually turning 17 next week. Oh, happy birthday for next week. Izuku congratulated. Really nice quirk you got there. How long do your wings stretch out? About 2.5 times my height. Can you fly? Yeah, I can. I can also set my wings on fire and can breathe, create and manipulate fire. So you have a normal version and a fire version. Oh, wait. Your fire wing form is like a phoenix. Oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. He agreed slowly. Do you have names for the different types? Like, in case you get another type. Like, you can call the normal one your default aspect and your fire one can be your phoenix aspect. Hado suggested, leading them down another aisle. That's a great idea. So, I'll just call them aspects. Thanks, Hado-san. Oh, you're technically my kohai, right? The girl asked. Yeah, I am. That means I'm your senpai. So, you can call me Nezaru-senpai. And I'll call you. She trailed off, then faced her teachers. He's got your family name, right? Yes, his full name is now Izuku Yumezawa, answered Shota. She hummed and turned back to Izuku. That's a bit long, don't you think? No matter, I'll make it work. How about I call you little Yumezawa? She totally took inspiration from what I call her. Nimiri whispered to Hazashi. Okay, Nezaru-senpai, agreed Izuku. Great, little Yumezawa. Oh, we're here. Here are all the clothes for people with wing quirks. You might want to look at clothes with the little fire icon on the tag, Hado suggested. What for, listener? Questioned Hazashi. Well, since little Yumezawa told me about his phoenix aspect, I thought you'd want to get something fireproof in case he has to use it. She explained, then pulled a paper out of her pocket. The paper had a list of icons and what they meant. Here, in case there are some other requirements. If you need me, just shout out. And with that, she was gone. Fire icon is fireproof. Water icon is waterproof. Lightning bolt icon is electricity-proof. Metal icon is cutproof. Wow, they thought of a lot of things. And some clothes have more than one icon, too. Nimiri read. Well, kiddo, get some shirts and shorts and whatever else you want. Look, there's hoodies too, and some are hero merch, said Shota, pointing to a Fat Gum hoodie. Fat Gum is a good hero. He was very compliant when I told him where to go when he was chasing a villain. He said that if I ever needed help, I could call him or his agency. Izuku nodded sagely, approaching the hoodie. He looked at the tag and immediately turned to face the other three. I can't. Why not? Asked Shota. Izuku looked down. It's too much. In all honesty, they should have expected this. A kid who's just been rescued from an abusive and neglectful environment wouldn't just easily accept things given to them. They'd be so used to just getting the cheapest things to scrape by that anything else would just be alien to them. Why would Izuku be any different? It's not, Izuku, he stated, letting out a sigh and letting go of the tag he just read. Between us three, we work 7 jobs. We're all teachers and heroes, and Zashi has his radio station. 25 yen won't even make a dent. These are clothes to suit your needs, so we won't just get normal clothes and cut holes in them just because they're cheaper. Plus, you have an aunt that wants to spoil you rotten. But no buts. You go find a minimum of 7 of each clothing item. That means shirts, shorts, pants, and whatever else. And a hoodie or 2. Can't go without the hoodies. Is that clear, problem child? Izuku reluctantly nodded his head in resignation. Good. Now go. If you want to try something on, just tell us. Izuku nodded again and shuffled away from the trio. Hazashi turned to his husband. Was that really necessary? I mean, you were kinda harsh. Yeah, I agree with Zashi. Nimiri added. Due to his previous living conditions, Izuku has this mindset that makes him think that getting things from others and accepting help is basically the same as committing murder. And it's also ingrained in his mind that he has to follow orders. So, as much as I hate it, it's the only way we can help him for now. We've just got to show him that accepting help and things from others is normal. He explained. People can be so cruel. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 murmured, slowly shaking her head in sadness. A few minutes passed in silence before a mop of messy green curls appeared into view. Izuku walked up to them awkwardly holding a few shirts, shorts, pants, and 3 hoodies. "I'm gonna try on some shirts," he mumbled, then proceeded to walk away from the group and towards to the changing rooms. "I'm gonna find something really adorable for the listener to wear that can't refuse." "𝗵𝗲𝗄, come on, let's go." 𝐒𝐫𝐴𝐵 smiled, tugging the other along and leaving the other tired man to sigh and walk over to the changing rooms to wait for the broccoli child. "Hey, kiddo, how are the clothes? Can I take a look?" Shota called through the door. "Oh, okay," came the muffled, stuttered reply, before Izuku opened the door and Shota had suppressed a groan. "Problem child, I should be surprised, but I'm really not. This is something that you would absolutely do," he stated, absolutely deadpan. Izuku sputtered, "Hey, it's not that bad. I used to have a shirt like this and it was my favorite. I just couldn't resist it." "So you actually walked around in a t-shirt saying t-shirt?" he asked incredulously, eyebrow raised in question. Izuku stiffened slightly and looked the man dead in the eyes. Yes indeed I did. You really live up to your nickname, Problem Child." He sighed. "I'll take that as a compliment," giggled the teen. "Izuku-kun, you have got to try this on," shouted his aunt, rushing at the two. Holding a hoodie overhead and 𝗧𝗓𝗧 following closely behind, they skidded to a stop with the activation of Shota's quirk, though neither of them paid any mind to him, more focused on dodging past him to get to Izuku. "Zuzu, would you be a dear for you auntie and try this on?" asked 𝗵𝗲𝗄, bordering on pleading. Izuku, shaking out of his previous startle from the two, hesitantly took the hoodie, nodded, then retreated to the changing rooms. 3 rounds of scissors, paper, rock later, they heard the door open to reveal Izuku in a black hoodie that was at least 3 sizes too big. On the front, it read "Shut the fuck up, I'm trying to sleep," with a picture of a cute, anime-style cat that was curled up and asleep next to a mug of coffee and a book. "Zuku, pull up the hood," 𝗧𝗓𝗧 prompted. Izuku, doing as asked, was pleasantly surprised to see that on the hood were 2 very cute cat ears. All attention shifted to Shota as he abruptly stood up from where he sat and silently ventured into the store, presumably to find a matching hoodie for himself. Not long after, Shota returned a matching hoodie for himself and, surprisingly, another hoodie but with a white color scheme instead of black, the latter of which was promptly shoved into 𝗧𝗓𝗧's arms. The 4 grabbed the other clothes and made their way up to the counter where a chipper Nezu Hado stood, waiting for people to assist. She caught sight of them and shot them a smile. "Heya," she called, "y'all ready to pay?" "Yes, we are, Hado," spoke Shota. "Great," she exclaimed, already starting on scanning and bagging up the clothes. Once that was finished, the small family of 2 parents, a kid and an aunt, said their goodbyes to the periwinkle-haired girl and left the store. They bounced from store to store with the adults constantly reminding the teen that he's free to get what he'd like, and the teen being stubbornly reluctant to do so. In fact, it got to the point that 𝗵𝗲𝗄, upon seeing Izuku frequently glancing at a Hawks figurine, had told the others to wait for her and marched into the store, resurfacing minutes later with not only a Hawks figurine, but a Present Mike and Midnight figurine as well. They were wandering around through the place, aimlessly walking around, when Izuku froze in his tracks. Izuku had been having a good day today, if you didn't count the stabbing part. He was with his new family that had his 2 guardians, Sho and 𝗧𝗓𝗧, and his aunt, Aunt Nem. And then he saw them. And then they saw him. And he froze. And they froze. He started trembling. Sho, 𝗧𝗓𝗧, and his aunt hadn't noticed yet, bickering over something or the other. But Izuku couldn't breathe. "Guys, look, it's useless Deku." One kid pointed. The other 3 of Izuku's bullies snickered and smirked. "Oh, is worthless Deku trying to act like a normal person?" a girl said, and Izuku felt his wings puff up in agitation and fear. By this point, the group of bullies were starting to walk towards him, throwing insults and taunts at him. It was all too familiar. He couldn't call out to his guardians, either, as he felt his throat seize up and his words die. All he could do was step back from the advancing group. His wings twitched. His gaze went up to the sky, then to his tormentors. Would this be self-defense? He really didn't want to get into trouble. Then his choice was made for him when he saw one of them activate their quirks. His fight-or-flight instincts kicked in and he shot up into the sky with a flap of his emerald wings. He saw the shocked faces on the bullies' faces and people looking up at the shadow he was casting. He saw Shota and 𝗧𝗓𝗧 shove their stuff into Auntie Nem's arms, telling her something, then trying to follow after him, with Sho using his capture scarf and 𝗧𝗓𝗧 taking a more normal route. He could feel himself spiraling into a panic attack, his breathing getting quicker and shallow, tears streaming down his freckled cheeks. With watery sobs, he flew to the closest roof and crash-landed onto it from his spinning gate. He skidded on the concrete and his back slammed into a wall. He curled into himself, wings wrapping protectively around him, and his hand tugged at his green curls in an effort to ground himself while the other clutched his shirt. Izuku cried silently. his selective mutism silencing any screams or shouts or words he'd wanted to speak. A hand grabbed his wrist, stopping his hand from pulling at his hair and preventing him from injuring himself further. He flinched violently away from the touch, though the hand remained, and an arm pulled him into a hug. "Izuku, kiddo, you gotta breathe." He could barely make out the voice. It was deep and comforting in a familiar way, a way that he'd only known from one person. His hand was brought away from his hair and placed on Sho's chest, over his heart. He could feel it beating and the man taking exaggerated breaths. "Match my breathing, Izuku," Shota spoke, voice cutting through the static in his ears like a hot knife through butter. He took a big, shuddering breath in attempt to mimic the other's calm breathing. He failed miserably. A few minutes of slower, though admittedly shaky, breaths later, and the door to the roof swung open, revealing Hisashi, the noise and sudden movement making the brunette flinch. The blonde's gaze swept over the roof and landed on the two. "Sho," he murmured, then slowly approached the duo. As much as he really wanted to dash over there, he wasn't just going to reset his husband's progress by sending their kid into another panic attack. He knelt down beside them and wrapped them tightly into a hug. It took a while, but eventually everyone was calmed down enough to head back to the car. Izuku, having fallen asleep, was now being carried by Shota, who was currently acting as the family's emotional pillar, as Hisashi, being the most emotional of the two, was currently trying and failing to disguise his worry, stress, and sadness. They found Nemuri pacing frantically in front of the car, and when she spotted them she ran so fast it could have been a teleportation quirk. "Is he all right?" she questioned, worry evident in her tone. "He'll be fine after a good rest," answered Shota. "What happened, though?" Nemuri asked, walking them back to the car. They got in, Shota letting Izuku lean on his shoulder in the back. When he answered, "I'm not too sure, we'll ask when we get home and he gets sleep." Nemuri, being the only one not preoccupied, Hisashi still in his previous state, Shota being a pillow and Izuku sleeping on said pillow, was the one to drive. They arrived at home, and by that time Izuku, being the insomniac that he is and not needing much sleep, had woken up. He was silent all the way up to the apartment while helping carry the bags, much to the other three's dismay. "Sho, Zashi, I'm gonna head home. I think you three need some alone time to sort this out. Make sure my nephew is okay, will you?" Nemuri said to the two. "We will, Nem. Get home safe. We'll see you at UA," replied Shota. "And Izuku will be coming, too. He's sitting in with Sho's second years and having lessons with Nezu when they do practicals," added Hisashi from behind Shota. "Cool. Anyway, I'll go now. Bye." After exchanging goodbyes, Nemuri left and the two shut the door and went to Izuku's room. They stopped outside of the closed door and shared a look. "Izuku, we're coming in," stated the Ravenet. After silence, they shared another glance and Shota opened the door. Izuku was curled up in his new cat hoodie underneath his blanket, though they could both see the tears running down his face. "Izuku," called Shota in the softest voice he could manage. No reply. They walked further into the room and sat on either side of the boy. "Kiddo, do you want a hug?" asked the other. Izuku hesitated a moment, thinking it over, then nodded and sat up, arms wrapping tightly around him from both sides, and he sobbed silently into Hisashi's shoulder. "What happened, Izuku?" asked Shota. Izuku pulled away, held his trembling hands in front of him and started signing. "I can't talk right now." "Why not, little listener? I have undiagnosed selective mutism. It happens when I'm scared, sad, uncomfortable, and other emotions like that or something." Izuku answered shakily. "That's fine. Is that why you learned sign?" Hisashi was taking a less devastating approach by easing Izuku into the conversation that was bound to happen. Izuku nodded. "What about you?" "I learnt because my quirk made me deaf, and Shota learnt because of me." "Makes sense. How long have you had it?" asked Shota. "Since the bullying started. My throat would just lock up." "Oh, do you want to tell us what happened?" The kid paused a moment. "I saw some of my old bullies. They were approaching me and teasing me, calling me Deku and useless. I backed away from them and tried to call out, but I went mute. Then one kid activated their quirk and rushed at me, so I panicked and flew away. I crashed onto that roof while trying to suppress a panic attack." "I'm sorry, Izu," apologized Hisashi. Izuku frowned, furrowed his eyebrows, and gave a questioning look. "What for? We should have been there, kid," Shota answered, matching Izuku's frown. "It's not your fault, though." "It may not be, but we could have prevented it." Hisashi spoke up, and the brunette had trouble processing the words. Izuku's brain was seriously shutting down right now. Like, he was trying to fight off the tiredness and failing miserably. He leaned further into Hisashi's chest as sleep came to claim him. But all he could think about was of how lucky he was to have found these two. So, as the last of his energy left him, his throat unlocked and he found his words. He whispered, "Good night, Dad. Good night, Papa." And with that, he fell into sweet darkness. Izuku woke up the next morning at 10:30, surrounded by coffee, cream, and sugar, still feeling partially drained from the day before. He was going to go back to sleep to ward away the tiredness he felt. But that idea was thrown out of the window when he could hear his dad's talking. Now, they weren't talking loudly, but Izuku had a feeling that his quirk may have given him better sight and hearing, akin to an actual bird. He sat up in his bed, accidentally dislodging sugar from her place on his chest, earning himself a yowl from the cat, and promptly fell onto the floor. Did you know that birds have hollow bones? Because they do, meaning the only way you'd tell he fell was from hearing a rustle from feathers. The greenette rolled onto his back with great effort and laid on the floor, looking at the ceiling and contemplating life. The cats had other plans, apparently. Cream not so gracefully jumped onto his stomach and the other two poked him in the face. Izuku had never had a wake-up alarm more persistent than these cats. Fine, I'm up, he stated, scooping up Cream and gently pushing away coffee and sugar before standing up. Coffee, needing attention, jumped onto his desk and leapt into his hood. Following Coffee's example, Sugar jumped onto his desk but instead slunk into Izuku's hoodie pocket. Sighing, he walked out of the room. His dads were in the kitchen, Ʒashi making what looked to be tamagoyaki, while Sho simply leaned against a cupboard. Both talked in hushed tones. Ʒashi looked conflicted about something and Sho was frowning slightly as he stepped in. Sho, having more situational awareness than the other, noticed him first. Hey, kiddo, you sleep well? He nodded before deciding that he should probably give a verbal answer as to tell them that he wasn't still mute. I slept well. Both brightened at Izuku, happy that he wasn't non-verbal, and the greenette shared the sentiment. You're speaking again, listener. Yep, he smiled back. So, kid, start Sho, a sly grin replacing his frown. Which of us is dad and which is papa? Izuku turned bright red from embarrassment, as his last memories of the night came flooding back to him and he buried his strawberry red face into Cream's white fur. Your dad, came the muffled reply as he motioned to Shota, and your papa, he continued, this time motioning to Ʒashi. His dad snorted and said, Nem owes me 500 yen. Wah, you bet on that, exclaimed Izuku, head shooting up so fast he nearly got whiplash. He just shrugged in response. Zuku, where are the other two gremlins? Asked his other dad. Sugar's head popped out of his pocket and her tail flicked from the other side, while Coffee transferred from his hood to his neck like a scarf, making them laugh. Great timing, you two, Izuku praised, the cats meowing happily in response. Are you making tamagoyaki for breakfast? Questioned the kid. You guessed it, listener. Why don't you and Sho go set up the table? He said. Okie, agreed Izuku, quickly placing Cream on the floor and doing as told, Shota already getting out plates. It was after they breakfast that the two adults sat Izuku down to have a conversation about recent events. So, Izuku, we've got to talk to you about some things. Shota spoke from across the table. Okay, came the hesitant reply. Shio told us about the burn scar you've got, as well as the multiple other scars. Can you tell us where they're from? It continued. Well, the burn scar I is from my 𝐵 and the other scars are from my bullies, though some may be in Ko. Shota sighed. Right. Well, Tsuki is gonna come by so we can sort out arresting the Midoriyas and some other things with Aldera and stuff. He should be arriving soon, actually, informed Ʒashi from beside Shota. The other two nodded in acknowledgement, before there was a knock at the door to prove the blonde's words. That'll be him, his dad stated as he stood to answer the door. He returned moments later followed by Tsukachi, to which Izuku teleported in front of them with his hand out to shake in greeting. Heya, Tsuki, Izuku beamed, face losing any hint of the conversation before. Heya, kid, the detective responded, taking the hand and shaking it. How have you been? Good. Dad and Papa and Auntie Nem took me shopping. The greenette answered in excitement. Naomasa's gaze flicked to his friend's face. It was stony but you see the blush creeping up the man's neck. Is that so? Sounds like fun. I'm assuming Auntie Nem is Nimuri. Nodding, Izuku started rambling. Yep, she's Midnight, but you probably already knew that. She's really cool and fun. Auntie said that when Papa and Dad need to go somewhere, she'd look after me and we could go get ice cream. Naomasa nodded himself saying, yeah, she's a whole lot of fun. She helps me with some of the cases. The detective got a gleam in his eyes as his sight went from Izuku to Shota to Ʒashi. So, kid, who's your dad and who's your papa? And Papa, cheered Ʒashi, far too happy to have the title. Shota just groaned, sighed and dragged a hand down his face that muffled his words of acceptance that yes, he was now going to be called Dad. I'm his dad. Naomasa snickered at the new teasing material he'd just gained and whispered something that sounded very much like Tensao, though Shota was sure it wasn't that, because surely his friend would have enough sense to not call him that if he wanted to live. Well, it sounds like you had fun. Naomasa turned back to Izuku. Yeah, it was great. Until the end, that is. Izuku trailed off, likely remembering the trip's ending. Naomasa's lips tugged down into a frown, recalling what Shota had told him about and what Nezu had spoken of on Izuku's history. Why don't we move to sit comfortably? This might be long. The four moved to the living room, sitting around the coffee table. Tsuki placed his messenger bag beside him and took out some paperwork and a recording device. Okay, Izuku, would you like to sort out your paperwork first, or your statements? Izuku cocked his head in confusion. Statements, plural. Aren't I only doing one? Suki chuckled, observant as ever. I see. Well, you're to do one on the discrimination that you were subjected to at your old school, one for the case against your parents, the blood pool case, and then for the sludge villain attack that we believe you were subjected to. The sludge villain? What do you mean? His dad's gaze traveled between the two in confusion. Izuku, what does he mean? Asked Papa. The boy hesitated a moment before slumping back in defeat, tilting his head to see only the ceiling. Bakugo wasn't the first to be attacked. It was me. I only found out about the second attack after a few days, though. I suppose we'd better get the statements over and done with first. We can start with the sludge villain. The detective nodded in agreement. I'm obligated to ask you if you're all right with me recording these statements, as well as telling you that my quirk, lie detector, will be in use. The brunette nodded slightly in confirmation, and Suki placed the recorder on the table and turned it on. I am Detective 𝗵𝗲 𝗔𝗂𝐁𝐲 of the Musutafu Police Department, here with Izuku Yamazawa to take his statement on the sludge villain attack. Also present for this statement are pro heroes Eraserhead and Present Mike. All right, Yamazawa, what was your partaking in the attack? Izuku's face was worryingly blank, and he knew that if this emotionless mask cracked even a tiny bit, he wouldn't be able to get through the statements. He was fully aware that this was a very unhealthy coping mechanism. But it was one of the healthiest ones he'd had throughout his life. Going numb prevented him from feeling the pain. I was the first attack of the day. After the purse snatching that started it all, of course. I was heading back to the apartment after school, a little later than school let out because I was held back by some of my bullies. My situational awareness wasn't at its best as I was dissociating, so I wasn't able to sense the oncoming attack. The sludge villain was upon me, trying to suffocate me to use as a disguise or something of the sort. I couldn't really hear much because my hearing was fuzzy. The villain asked me why I wasn't fighting back, and so I asked him why I should. There was a sharp intake of breath from Hisashi, but Izuku pushed onwards. He asked me if I was suicidal, and I thought on it, strained for something that said otherwise, that I didn't indeed want to die. I said yes, after all I truly am was. I was suicidal, wanted to die, wanted to end the pain and suffering in myself. And he offered to make it as painless as he possibly could, and I agreed. I started losing consciousness, but just as I blacked out, a hero saved me. He paused for them to digest it, although the silence was broken by Shota as he stated, Izuku, you're gonna be doing therapy. Izuku nodded and continued. I came back to consciousness as All Might was slapping me awake. All Might did what? He was slapping me awake. Yes, I'm aware that it's far from professional, but I guess he didn't want me to die. The brunette chuckled humorlessly. The one time I get saved is when I don't want to be. How stupid. Not that it mattered anyway, seeing as I died despite that, he thought darkly. He'd signed my notebook and was about to take his leave, but I so desperately wanted to ask him something. To know if he would be the hero for me like I believed, or if he was just like everyone else and would try to break me. I grabbed onto his pants as he flew off, and he tried to kick me off. I told him I'd die if I let go. He landed on a nearby roof, and I asked my question and he answered, then left. Izuku sat straight and looked at the three with a watery, broken smile and tears streaming down his cheeks, and I finally broke. Suki cleared his throat and schooled his expression. After all, it wouldn't do to be emotional when he had a job to do. All right, Yamazawa, I've just got to ask one more thing. Did All Might get any medics at all? An ambulance? Not as far as I know. Okay, I think we'll end this one here, then. He ended the recording and looked back at the teen, who now looked painfully blank once more. Kid, are you okay? Would you like to take a small break? I'll be fine, Izuku answered. The detective sighed and shot glances at the two others. Shota looked like he was about to murder someone, and honestly, he probably was. Hisashi looked heartbroken, and 𝗵𝗲 couldn't help but think if he'd be all right to sit through all of the statements. All right, kid, it's your call. He sighed again and started recording. Yamazawa, can you please explain to us what happened for the blood pool to occur? I fell, was the short answer. Everyone in the room blanched. You fell? Yep, Izuku confirmed, popping the P. Well, I was attacked first and then I fell. To be honest, he really wasn't lying. He was actually attacked by the sludge villain, and then he was emotionally broken by All Might. And he really did fall, just not accidentally. Well, did you see who attacked you? He was blonde and looked really fucking American. He attacked me and then left. Oh, and my head was injured too. Was he armed? Questioned Suki. I mean, he probably could have killed me with his quirk. 𝗵𝗲 raised an eyebrow. You know his quirk? I dunno. Some sort of transformation quirk or something. Is that all you remember? Izuku nodded. That's all I can tell you. Once again, the recorder was turned off and Izuku went to go get a cup of water, leaving the three adults to talk. Not that I think he'd lie. But is that all true? Sadly, it is. This kid has gone through hell and back. There was a choked sob from beside Shota, and both men turned to Hisashi, who buried his face in the crook of his husband's neck. He was suicidal, Show. He wanted to die. We could have lost him. Shota wrapped his arms around him and rubbed his back to comfort him. By the time Izuku had returned, Hisashi was clutching Sho's hand like a lifeline and looked like he'd cried a lot. "Papa, are you okay?" he asked, rushing to hug him. Hisashi flashed him the best smile he could and said, "I'm fine, Zuku." Izuku frowned. "But you were crying." His papa carted a hand through his soft, green curls. "It's okay, Izuku. I'm just glad that you're with us and you're safe." Izuku's lips pressed into a thin line before he sighed and spoke. "Okay, if you say so." His gaze flicked back to Tsuki and he resumed his previous place. "Are doing Aldera or Midoriyas first?" The detective just shrugged. "I guess we can start with the Midoriyas if you want." At Izuku's nod, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 started the recording device once more and began. "All right, your biological parents are 𝐭 and Hisashi Midoriya, correct?" "That's correct. We've been told that Hisashi Midoriya has been absent for your life. Is this true? And if it is, when did he leave?" "Hisashi left us after my diagnosis as quirkless. So, when I was about 4.5 years old. Did Hisashi ever hurt you in any way?" Izuku hesitated. He didn't know why. He knew that that man deserved to be locked up. He knew that, but still. "He did." He admitted. "He'd hurt us. A lot. He and 𝐭 would fight. And he'd scream and hit and kick. He'd use his fire breathing to burn us and he'd pull me by my hair and beat me and lock me in the closet. When he drank he was even worse. He would try to strangle whichever of us was the closest, or he'd throw bottles at us. Sometimes 𝐭 would just leave the house for a few days to avoid him. For those days he'd tie me up and hurt me or lock me in the closet without giving me food. But when he found out that I was quirkless, he just lost it." Izuku's hand started tugging at his hair while his other started shaking. He grabbed my wrist so tightly that he nearly broke it and he dragged me outside of my room. He yelled and screamed at me and it hurt so badly and I just wanted it to stop. I looked to my mom and she just stood there indifferently and she just watched. Hisashi started using fire breath and it hurt more and more and more, and it burned so much. His dad's eyes widened in realization and he whispered, "The burn. The burn Chiyo told us about. That's what you're talking about right now, isn't it?" "Why yeah," Izuku mumbled, tilting his head down for his curls to hide his tears. "After that, he left. We never saw him since." 𝗵𝗲𝗄 looked up from the notes that he was taking, briefly taking in Izuku's state. "Okay, did 𝐭 hurt you as well?" "Only rarely. Usually she would just ignore me, though when she did, she'd mostly throw knives at me or pull my hair with her quirk. But one time she got really mad and she used her quirk to stop the blood flow to my hand. It was only for like half a minute, though." Hisashi was seething with anger and Shoto looked like he was about to up and go commit murder. He probably was. 𝗵𝗲𝗄's fists were clenched so tight that his knuckles were white. "Anyway, she mostly just pretended like I didn't exist. Basically, not giving me food, clothes and stuff. I started doing jobs for people to get money to provide for myself. There was this really nice old lady who paid me a lot for babysitting her quirkless granddaughter, but she passed away a few months ago. It was really sad. That's basically it." He ended, staring emptily at the ceiling once again. "Well, if that's all, then we'll end this one here." The detective clicked off the device again and slumped in his seat with a shaky sigh. "That is absolutely horrible. How the fuck can people do things like this?" Hisashi stood abruptly, ghostly pale. "I'm gonna be sick," he stated, rushing to the bathroom. I don't." Shoto looked lost for words, his usually stoic face scrunched up in a mixture of worry, anger, sadness and a few other emotions. He took a deep breath to steady himself before placing his gaze on the greenette. "Are you okay?" Izuku's dull green eyes met Shota's own black ones. "I'll be fine," he plainly stated in a monotone voice that shouldn't be used by his bright problem child. "But you're not." Dragging his gaze to the floor, he conceded, "I'm not. But I will be. I want to be." Shota's lips tugged into grim smile. "Me too, kiddo." A while later found the group sitting in their places once again, a heavy air ready to suffocate any and all laid over them like a thick, uncomfortable blanket. No one was really over the previous statement, none at all ready for the next that awaited them. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 cleared his throat, breaking the silence, and began to speak. "This one won't really take long since Nezu's getting video evidence, but we do still need your statement." "I understand." The recording device was turned on for one last time and they started. "Yamazawa, how long has the bullying been going on for?" "The teasing started when I was 4. Shortly after that came the actual physical bullying. The teachers turned a blind eye to this. When I entered primary school, the teachers started subtly encouraging the other kids, but by junior high they weren't even hiding it. They'd actively make situations that were against me in the worst ways possible. They'd jeopardize my test scores and write horrible things on my records and the sort. Quirk usage against me started in my 4th year of primary school. The flowers started in junior high, though." "Flowers?" inquired 𝗵𝗲𝗄, genuinely confused. "Red spider lilies, chrysanthemums, a white lily if someone was feeling strangely nice, the like." "Red spider lilies," murmured his dad, trailing off with a pale face. "They suicide baited you," he finished in a deadly whisper. "Yeah, not fun, I'll tell you." It's a shame they died before I got to the apartment, though. The color would have done me some good in that shitty plain room. Kid, don't joke, he snapped, somewhat unnerved by the nonchalance his kid had at being told to kill himself. I'm not joking, he muttered back. They were genuinely pretty, and plus, gardening is a good distraction. You were told to kill yourself. How are you okay with that? I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with any of this. My life has been a fucking shit show and I'm the fucking target. You think I wanted Deku to think about suicide? You think I wanted to feel this shitty? I am insecure and self-hating and self-conscious, and Kami knows what the fuck else. Izuku, by this point, had stood up and was breathing heavily, tears streaming down his freckled cheeks. Nobody liked me. I was hated and cast out, abused and neglected, and I hated every fucking thing about it. I wanted it to end so badly. And then Katsuki fucking had to break me like the shitty, egotistical bastard he fucking is and tell me to. And I quote, if you really want to be a hero, there actually might be a way. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of a building. And I was so fed up with everything and everyone, and I seriously couldn't find it in myself to care that the sludge would kill me. And fucking all Dick just had to ruin my shitty life all over again. I just got so fed up with it, and Izuku's eyes widened as he cut himself off, feeling his throat seize up and fell to his knees, hands brought up to cover his face as he sobbed heavily. Silently, he didn't dare continue in fear of revealing what had actually happened after All Might had left. How he actually got his quirk. Izuku didn't know how they'd react if they found out that he'd killed himself. 𝗵𝗲 rushed to end the recorder as the other two men quickly teleported to their son's side, followed shortly by Tsuki. Shit, I'm sorry, Izuku. I didn't mean to. His dad apologized, wrapping him in comforting arms. Hasashi added himself to the hug. Izuku, baby, are you okay? The brunette continued to cry without noise before he lifted shaky hands to sign. I can't speak anymore. 𝗵𝗲 turned quizzically to the two husbands, understanding the sign. SM disorder, Hasashi answered quietly, to which the detective nods in understanding. The blonde turned back to the winged teen and murmured, That's okay, Zuku. It's perfectly fine. The boy hesitated a moment before signing an okay. Time was lost to them as they stayed there, huddled on the floor around the crying child. Maybe it was an hour, or two, maybe only half an hour, though perhaps it may have been minutes, until Izuku's crying had subsided and sleep had come to claim him. Shoto lifted him in his arms and placed him gently on the sofa, tear tracks and freckles plainly visible on his now serene-looking face. The cats quickly scampered to gather around him, providing warmth, comfort, and a ways to ground himself if need be, while the adults moved to the kitchen to make lunch and talk before they needed to fix up Izuku's paperwork. Izuku was awoken from his nap by a hand carting through his curls and a soft voice coaxing him to wake up. He blinked up blearily to see his papa smiling at him. He untucked his arms from the blanket that had been draped over him and made grabby hands at the man who happily scooped him up into a hug. Like that action had been a key, the lock on Izuku's voice box clicked open and his words formed on his tongue, ready to be spoken, to which he did. Hey, Papa. He whispered. Hey, baby bean. His papa whispered back, we got lunch. How do you feel about fried rice? The brunette hummed thoughtfully, then responded quietly. I think that fried rice sounds great, you dig. Hasashi chuckled. Yeah, listener, I dig. He hoisted up the kid so he could latch onto his friend akin to a koala, and walked to the kitchen. Sho, look, I don't know how to break this to you, but I'm clearly the favorite dad, Hasashi stated, motioning to the brunette in his arms. I see that someone has replaced our little birdie with a koala. His husband noted. Also, I'm clearly the favorite dad. Izuku snickered. Sorry, but Dad's right. Papa, you're not my favorite dad. Dad is my favorite dad. Hasashi narrowed his eyes at his son's betrayal as both Shota and 𝗵𝗲 started laughing like madmen. Kiddo, there better be a but in the next things you say or I'm gonna drop you, he warned. But you are my favorite papa. The brunette continued, joining in with the laughter, shortly followed by a few chuckles from Hasashi. Nearly gave me a heart attack. Listener, thought you didn't love me anymore, he wailed dramatically. The kid nuzzled back into his blonde dad's warmth before saying, I love you, Papa. I'll love you too, my little listener. All right, come on, let's eat. We still gotta do paperwork, reminded Tsuki. Oh, Tsuki, can I please ask you about your quirk? Asked Izuku excitedly, teleporting to the man's side. Sure, kiddo, ask away, he answered, taking his seat at the table, followed shortly by Hasashi and Shota. Izuku took his place as well and started rapid-firing questions while the other two watched on in interest as their kid dissected the other's quirk. It was interesting seeing Emerald's work in real life, and they could all see exactly why Nezu had taken interest in the boy. Lunch continued like this until everyone had finished and Izuku had dissolved into indecipherable mutterings that were going at lightning speed. Once they'd finished cleaning up, they got to work on filling out Izuku's paperwork until they came to the last one, quirk registry. So, Izuku, what are you naming your quirk? Asked his dad. Izuku hummed in contemplation before answering. Second chance wings. Shota raises an eyebrow, presumably at the second chance part that came out of seemingly nowhere. Not that Izuku could blame him, seeing as they didn't know about what he'd done. The boy just shrugged, and with one more suspicious glance, Shota stopped it. In the end, they'd put that Izuku's quirk, now called second chance wings, gave him his wings with a fire aspect to boot, with the chance that other aspects may also show up later on. 𝗵𝗲 also ended up crashing at their place on the couch after they'd watched the pre-quirk Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse trilogy. And they all just swamped the living room with pillows and blankets to sleep. Tuesday is nearing the end, and with it the close of the 4th day since Deku's missing report was filed. The hag and old man were getting antsy the longer Deku wasn't found, and Katsuki was fucking irritated about it. What was so important about stupid, quirkless Deku? And then yesterday, some shitty losers show up to fucking school spreading rumors that Deku has a stupid wing quirk. Deku was fucking missing. Not that Katsuki cared, but Auntie was probably worried sick that Deku was gone. The loser probably died in a ditch like the scum he is. It was the end of school, and Katsuki was making his way home. He stopped right in his tracks when he spotted the Midoriya household surrounded by police personnel. Some were taping off the place while others talked to neighbors or into their handheld radios. Curious and somewhat worried for Auntie, he stomped up to an officer, tapping his shoulder to get his attention, and as the man turned he spoke. "What happened here?" The officer raised an eyebrow before turning the idea of telling the kid over in his mind a few times. "Sorry, kid, can't tell you." And with that the man turned back around to resume his prior conversation. Katsuki turned and ran to his house, eager to tell the hag and old man. But as soon as he entered the house he was met with the sight of his parents sitting across from a plain-looking man on the couches. He approached cautiously, unsure of what to do. Ultimately, a bumped-over shoe was enough for the plain-looking guy's situational awareness to kick in as his gaze snapped to him. The man's posture tightened, his demeanor changing entirely as his face soured. If looks could kill, Katsuki would be more than 6 feet in the ground. Katsuki immediately felt like a scolded child, even if he knew that anything he did at school never reached home's ears. The teachers made sure of it. "Brat, this is Detective 𝗧𝗵𝗲. He's the man that we went to file Izuku's missing status, remember?" The hag spoke, also turning to him, along with his old man. "Oh, that's why he seemed familiar. 1,000 yen said that him being here had something to do with the Midoriyas." "TCH, yeah, I remember," Katsuki said, then turned to the detective. "Why the fuck are you here?" "Well, I want to be here to arrest you, but I can't because I've made a promise. Instead, I'm here to ask you about Inko Midoriya, tell you that we've found Izuku, and inform you of your punishments." As the detective listed them off, Katsuki could feel the color draining from his face, leaving him concerningly pale. "I'm not sure I understand, detective." The old man looked at said detective with a questioning gaze. "I think it would be best if your son sat down for this," suggested 𝗧𝗵𝗲, though he made it sound more of a command. Katsuki hesitantly took the seat between his parents before the man spoke up again. "Firstly, I'd like to inform you that we have found Izuku. Why do you keep referring to him by his first name? Why aren't you calling him Midoriya?" Mitsuki cut in. "Because he isn't a Midoriya anymore," he responded plainly. The blonde woman looked at him like he'd grown a second head. "What? As I was saying, he was found on Saturday night. Why isn't he with us? We're supposed to take him, and if his parents couldn't take care of him anymore?" Masaru inquired calmly, a nice contrast to the two blondes. "Well, there are a few reasons why he isn't in your custody. The main reason is because he'd be living under the same roof as his main bully. Secondly, 2 pro heroes that Izuku knew were happy to take him in. Another being that since he's Nezu's personal student, he got the choice of being a UA ward, which he gladly took." He explained. "Katsuki isn't a fucking bull." "Yes, he is, ma'am. We'll get to that later. Meanwhile, feel free to ask any questions about Izuku and where he is, though you must understand that I may not be allowed to answer some questions," he quickly countered, cutting off the woman. "Are we allowed to see him?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 turned to face Masaru. "That is up to Izuku unless we find that you might bring him harm. Although your son is not allowed to go see him whatsoever." "Who is Izuku staying with now?" Mitsuki queried, seemingly having reined in her temper. "He's been adopted by the Yamezawas," he answered. "I ain't ever heard of those fucking heroes," scoffed Katsuki. "Must be some low-rate fuckers that got stuck with stupid Deku." Okay, maybe 𝗵𝗲 was a little petty and annoyed with this brat when he answered. Izuku was adopted by pro heroes present Mike and Eraserhead. Furthermore, he's Nezu's personal student, as I stated previously. Not to mention that his aunt is pro hero Midnight. Internally, 𝗵𝗲 was extremely smug at the Bakuga's shocked and amazed expressions. Externally, he was indifferent. He contemplated if he should speak his next words and concluded that there probably won't be any negative backlash. "Also, I'd rather you stop talking about him like he's a piece of trash. Izuku is a brilliant person and far from stupid or useless. In fact, he's made a really big name in the analyst, police and heroics department as Emerald and Jade respectively. Isn't Emerald that new famous analyst that the news has been talking about? Masaru was the first to break out of his surprise. Indeed, heck, the kid makes way more than I do and he's not even half my age. Not to mention the amount of heroes he knows now. He chuckled. More than 3/4 of Japan's heroes would die for the skills he has. And his weight line is really long. Actually, I probably should bring that up with Sho and Zashi to make sure he's not overworking himself. The last part mumbled to himself, though heard clearly by the others in the room. He looked back at the family before also smugly telling them about the Greenette's other persona. Jade is an online vigilante. Basically just a fancy term for hacker. He hacks into police files to solve cases and hero comms to help guide heroes. Isn't that illegal? Stuttered Masaru, to which the detective shrugged. He helps more than he hurts. Katsuki was next to break out of his stupor. Some shitty extras at school said that Deku had a quirk. That's not true, is it? Sorry, can't tell you. He responded, absolutely not sorry. What the fuck do you mean? The boy yelled, jumping to his feet, palms crackling. You're already on thin ice, Bakugo. I suggest heavily against doing anything rash that you'll regret later. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 warned pointedly. Speaking of which, why exactly is Katsuki in trouble? Asked said boy's father. Illegal quirk usage, assault, quirk discrimination, theft, abuse, harassment. Need I continue? Tsukachi listed off. He took in the shaken family and felt a little guilty about the boy's parents. Did he hurt Izuku? Mitsuki seemed to have lost her previous spark. He shot her a sad smile. I'm sorry to inform you that Izuku was Katsuki's main victim. The woman slumped in her seat looking absolutely broken and lost. I can't believe it, she whispered. I knew that there'd been a falling out, but I hadn't thought it was this bad. Masaru shot a disappointed glare at his son before turning back to the man opposite him. I'm sure that the police are doing something right. I mean, Katsuki isn't going scot-free with this, said man sighed warily before speaking. Yes, Katsuki is getting punishment for his actions. Although, Izuku has persisted that I water down his consequences. Regrettably, I am obligated to follow his wishes to an extent as he was the victim and has a great say in what happens to his abuser. If it weren't for that, your son would be in jail right now for the aforementioned charges. The blonde teen scoffed, evidently skeptical of the detective's words as if the kid were above the law, unaware of the storm coming his way. What are you gonna fucking do? Send me to my room and ground me? No, the man simply said, before continuing on to what would inevitably put the boy in his place. Instead, you are to attend mandatory anger management and therapy. You'll be wearing quirk-canceling cuffs, will be under close surveillance. You'll be blacklisted from any hero course bar UA. Your actions will also be put on record. And if you do manage to get into UA, any wrongdoing will be a strike, 3 strikes, and you'll be expelled or transferred. Why you can't fucking do this? The boy yelled his aggressive protest, jumping to his feet once again and setting off small explosions. Trust me, I can. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 chuckled darkly. I would do so much worse for what you've done to Izuku. Alas, the kid has puppy eyes that could take over the world. That aside, I've got a few questions about 𝐭 𝗵𝗃 that I'd like to ask you. He continued. The family, too shook to protest, just stared dumbly at his transition from dark humor to bright as the sun. Inwardly, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 cackled. He knew full well that it truly disoriented the criminals that he interviewed. First, I'm obligated to tell you that 𝐭 is going to be arrested as soon as we find her, given that she is currently on the run from the law. Now, have you any idea to where she'd go? He questioned. She might have run away to be with that husband of hers, Hisashi Midoriya, offered Masaru. Mitsuki scoffed. She's smitten by the man. Absolutely head over heels. It's a surprise that she stayed with Izuku instead of going off with him. He was such a shit person though. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 couldn't help but boggle over 𝐭's love for her abuser. Surely this woman couldn't be so loving towards a man who hurt her. It truly put masochists to shame. He checked his watch and sighed heavily at the time. He was supposed to finish this half an hour ago and Sansa would get on him for leaving him alone to face the rush hour of criminal activity. I apologize, but must now take my leave. Thank you for your time and hospitality, and I wish you the best of luck, he stated, bowing to the family before making his way out into his car. He could only hope that the youngest Bakugo had the sense to do as told so he could preserve his future, and hope that Sansa would accept donuts as a viable apology. Izuku was sitting on a nearby roof, overlooking the police knock at his old house. The empty shell of a home it once was, filled with laughter and smiles and hugs and affection that knew no bounds. He saw the officers realize that 𝐭 wasn't there and that the home was empty. And it hit him. It hit him like a truck. Izuku knew that he'd been oddly calm about this last month. He knew that when he woke up that night he didn't cry. Not the day that followed or the day after that. But seeing the police there, taping off that house just made it so real. He didn't know he was crying until the front of his shirt was too damp to go unnoticed. Izuku tried to blink away the tears, but they wouldn't stop flowing, wouldn't stop cascading down his freckled cheeks. His breaths were coming in shaky and uneven and too short for Izuku's preference as sobs racked his tiny frame. It hit him that he'd tried to kill himself. It hit him that he'd gotten a quirk. It hit him that he'd gotten away from 𝐭𝐽. It hit him that he'd gotten away from his bullies, from Bakugo. It made him overwhelmed and sad and happy and he wanted it to stop. To stop hitting him because he didn't like the thoughts. He didn't like the realizations. Because holy fuck, Izuku had tried to kill himself. He didn't register the red flash that appeared in his view. Izuku was quickly spiraling into a panic attack and his vision was blurred. He did, however, register the distant voice speaking. Hey, kid. It spoke softly. Izuku found it amusing that the voice was speaking like it was approaching a scared, wild animal, at least until he realized that it was talking to him. The voice continued, hey, little birdie, are you okay? Izuku actually laughed this time, hand tugging on green curls. It was a strained, watery, raw thing that sounded quite unhinged. No, he was not okay. Far from it, actually. And no, he choked out. He found it quite surprising that his throat hadn't locked up on him. That's fine. It's okay to not be okay. The voice comforted, is it all right if I come closer? Viridian curls bobbed up and down, slowly and hesitantly as he nodded his assent. The red came closer. It was obnoxiously bright and reminded him of a lot of things. It reminded him of the spider lilies and the roses that he once saw a guy proposing to his girlfriend with. Reminded him of a painting that the little girl he used to babysit painted for him. Reminded him of the red that his dad's eyes glowed when he used his quirk. Reminded him of his phoenix aspect. Reminded him of red sunsets on a beach filled with trash. It didn't remind him of Hisashi's flames, or blood, or red shoes that signified a person's suffering, or red eyes that used to look at him with fondness that turned to hate as he was hurt and beaten and abused. He could make out a figure now. They looked young and had blonde hair and red wings that were folded against their back. They crouched down in front of him, meeting his dimmed green gaze. A kind smile graced their face as they waved a bit to Izuku in greeting. Hey, little bird, my name is 𝗏𝗄𝐻. Would you like some help or some company? Izuku just nodded. He wasn't sure if it was to acknowledge one of his favorite heroes, or to the help, or the company, or even all three. He just nodded. The older bird sat cross-legged in front of him and pulled out one of those plastic water bottles that you grab from vending machines and held it out in offering. The greenette, who had calmed down immensely, gave a watery smile and took the bottle before opening it and sipping. Thank you, he whispered. No problem, little bird. Speaking of which, can I get a name? I can't keep calling you little bird. The older chuckled awkwardly and rubbed the back of his neck. Yumezawa. Izuku Yumezawa, he stated, but you can call me Izuku. Nice meeting you, Izuku. 𝗏𝗄𝐻 smiled brightly. In that case, feel free to call me 𝐭𝐽𝐲. Izuku, slipping a bit into his emerald persona, recalled all the information he could on the hero name, 𝗏𝗄𝐻's real name, 𝐭𝐽𝐲 Takami. Bought and raised by the HPSC in a program that basically turned children into soldiers, the same program that Lady Nagant was in. Publicly, you are 23 years old but you're actually 18, turning 19 in 2 months. 𝐭𝐽𝐲 stared dumbfoundedly at the kid in front of him in both fear and amazement. How do you know all that? Oh sorry, I keep forgetting that people who know my other personas don't know the actual me. The kid looked sheepish. Hi, I'm Izuku Yumezawa, though I also go by Emerald the Analyst or Jade the Hacker Vigilante. Holy sweet mother of chicken wings, whispered the pro. Izuku perked up at this. It's nearly lunchtime, can we go get KFC? 𝐭𝐽𝐲 seemed to snap out of his shock, instead brightening up at the prospect of KFC. Sure, I have the rest of the day off and I'm really hungry. Those wings work, right? The greenette nodded, grinning, and stretched out his wings, of course. These beauties aren't just for show. Wow, Izuku, those are really big wings. The blonde marveled, stretching out his own red wings that were smaller, if only by a little. So are yours, he replied. 𝐭𝐽𝐲 grinned and took off into the air, followed closely by the younger. The two flew side by side, course only altered by some tricks, until they reached a KFC. They landed in front of it, shocking a few people, and walked inside. They sat at a table and chatted animatedly. I like you, birdie, 𝐭𝐽𝐲 suddenly stated. Izuku's rambling was cut off. I've decided that I'm gonna be your older brother. The older continued. Oh okay. It sounded more of a question than an answer, but 𝐭𝐽𝐲 seemed extremely happy, though suddenly the hero came to a realization. Speaking of, who are your parents? Oh, you might know them as Eraserhead and Present Mike. Your dads are Present Mike and Eraserhead. That's so cool. 𝐭𝐽𝐲 was bordering on fanboying as he spoke excitedly. Wait, does that mean that they're technically my dads too? Izuku shrugged. He really didn't have an answer to that. I can call Dad and ask him. Who's who? Dad is Eraserhead, aka Shouta, and Papa is Present Mike, aka Hisashi. Oh, okay. The greenette nodded and pulled out his phone, dialing his dad before connecting it to his earphones and handing one to 𝐭𝐽𝐲, who put it in his ear, Izuku doing the same. His dad picked up before the third ring. Izuku, his dad questioned. Hi, Dad. How's school? Izuku greeted. Horrible. I should have just stayed at home with that leave Nezu gave me. These hellions are seriously trying to get themselves killed. What did they do? Try a broken rib, fractured elbow, and multiple bruises. Shota deadpanned. Both Greenette and Blonde winced at the injuries. Are you in class right now? Yes, the man confirmed. The class is listening in, by the way. I'll have to work on their subtleness. Dad, you are literally the best underground pro there is. Of course it'd be child's play to notice them listening in. Yeah, I'm flattered, problem child. Izuku could just see his dad rolling his eyes through the phone. Anyway, why did you call me? Oh, well, I just wanted to say that Hawks has now adopted me as his little brother, and he was asking if that would also technically make you and Papa his dads as well. He heard the man sigh before he spoke. Is he listening in right now? Izuku glanced at 𝐭𝐽𝐲, silently encouraging him to speak up. Hi, I'm Hawks, or Will. 𝐭𝐽𝐲 to call me. Yeah, I've been listening. He confirmed awkwardly. Welcome to the family, I guess. I genuinely think that you'll be Izuku's brother regardless of what me and 𝐬𝐵 say, so you might as well get the whole family. Well, you are taking this easier than I thought you would. Expect the unexpected, Shota said in a somewhat mysterious tone. Just come home by 5:30 p.m. and don't do anything too stupid or illegal. Burning Endeavor's agency is fine as long as you don't get caught. Dad, isn't your class listening in? Izuku yelped. It's fine, they have no proof. Also, are you gonna come to school tomorrow? Yeah, probably. Sitting around and doing nothing is boring. Okay, well, 𝐬𝐵 and I have to go early for a meeting, so you won't be able to go with us. 𝐭𝐽𝐲, are you free tomorrow morning? 𝐭𝐽𝐲 pondered it for a moment before nodding his head. Yeah, I'm free. Great. First big brother duty is to take Zuku to school. Okay, well, I've got to go. Class is ending. Bye, Dad, Izuku said cheerily. See ya, 𝐭𝐽𝐲 spoke. The call ended and Izuku was hit by a sudden realization. We totally forgot to order food. Oh yeah, also, cute nickname. I love it, Zuku. Izuku blushed and hid his face in his hands as a waitress came up to them. Hi, you've been here a while but you haven't gotten anything to eat. Is everything okay? Yeah, sorry. We just got lost in our conversation. 𝐭𝐽𝐲 apologized sheepishly. Oh, that's fine. Can I get you anything, then? Zuzu, what do you want? I dunno, chicken nuggets. You suggested that we come here. How do you not know what to get? Izuku pouted at his brother. Fine. Chicken nuggets and fries, I guess, please. And could I please have some chicken wings? Added 𝐭𝐽𝐲. Isn't that cannibalism? Asked the shocked waitress. Nope. Well, yes, birds like hawks, falcons, owls, and eagles eat other birds, as you can clearly see. He's a hawk, whereas I'm not really any specific type of bird, informed the Greenette. Oh, okay. Wait, is Hawks your dad? Her out-of-the-blue question flustered Izuku and made 𝐭𝐽𝐲 cackle. And no, the smaller squeaked, 𝐭𝐽𝐲 is my brother. Sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Sometimes my mouth talks without thinking. She apologized quickly, face flushing in embarrassment. It's fine, chuckled 𝐭𝐽𝐲. Right, I'll just go now. She bowed to the two and dashed off. The two ate, paid, and left. Once again 𝗧𝗵𝗲 off into the sky. So, where do you go to school? His brother asked. Well, I'm technically homeschooled, but I sit in with Dad's second years, answered Izuku. You don't go to a normal school? No, bad experience, he said. I think it's only fair that we exchange tragic backstories if we're gonna be family. Hey, I guess. You gonna start? Sure, Izuku shrugged, then proceeded to retell the nightmare that used to be his life. Not even halfway through the story, Izuku had to restrain his brother from going to murder at least a dozen people multiple times. It ended with both birds on a roof, hugging and crying. One cried from memories, and the other cried for the smaller. They calmed down and settled on the edge of the roof. It was a nice view, sun setting in a clear, orange sky. Izuku's brother sighed heavily from beside him, not looking away from the mesmerizing sunset. "Es my turn, isn't it?" The Greenette nodded, popping the P as he said, "Yep." Unnoticed by the red-winged hero, Izuku clicked on a recording device in his pocket. Of course he knew that the commission was corrupt and cruel, he just needed evidence to prove it to others. And so Izuku listened to 𝐭𝐽𝐲 as he recounted being bought from his mother and raised by the HPSC, the brutal training he had to endure every day, and the cruel missions they'd sent him on, making him kill countless people. Izuku had felt sick when 𝐭𝐽𝐲 told him about a time when the commission had made him kill a 5-year-old girl. In the end, he hadn't been able to do it and got bullet wound in his shoulder when he tried to protect the girl. The sky was dark and the wind was biting at their skin, though neither of them paid any mind to it as they cried for each other while they hugged. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," sniffled Izuku, slightly pulling away. "It's fine. Neither of us was at fault. Not for any of the shit that's happened to us." He chuckled, a bit watery. "Do you want to go home now?" Izuku asked. Nodding, 𝐭𝐽𝐲 agreed and stood up, gently pulling Izuku up as well. And if they held hands as they flew, it was because they're brothers. It was 10 minutes past 5:30 and the problem children still weren't home. Shota wanted to trust them, But it was extremely hard when Izuku was a trouble magnet. Not that it was Izuku's fault. Zashi's head poked out of the kitchen and Shota lifted his head from the papers he was marking. When were they supposed to be home? 10 minutes he was cut off by a thud and a yelp, followed by keys jangling. "We're home," came Izuku's voice, and both parents dashed to the opening door. They were met with the sight of Izuku and 𝐻𝐾𝐲, feathers ruffled and some bent the wrong way, wind-tousled hair and bright smiles. Both glanced at each other as soon as they registered the obvious tear tracks. Faded though they might be, Shota sighed as he looked between the two of them. "Why are you late?" "Well, Izuku was cut off by a disgruntled 𝐻𝐾𝐲. We were attacked." "You were attacked?" Azashi was quick to worry. "By pigeons," added the greenette as the other just nodded along solemnly. The older shuddered. It was horrible. Shota stifled a laugh as his husband sighed a breath of relief. He shook his head fondly at their antics. "How do you get into these things?" he asked in amused exasperation. "It was his fault," Izuku blamed, pointing to his older brother. Said older brother turned to the younger with a scandalized look. "It was your fault." Izuku stood unfazed. "Dad's, it was 𝐾𝐲's fault." "All him." The blonde's gaze snapped to the two adults. "It wasn't my fault, I swear. Those pigeons, they have a mind of their own." Shota really did laugh this time, followed closely by Hazashi, who bent over in laughter. It was safe to say that 𝐻𝐾𝐲 would be a great addition to the family. "Come on, listeners, time for dinner." Hazashi spoke, managing to even his breathing as he turned to walk to the table. Izuku grabbed 𝐻𝐾𝐲's hand and quickly dragged him inside, clearly eager to get some food in his system. Shota chuckled and closed the door before following his family, and he couldn't help but think of how lucky he was to have this family. Dinner was filled with excited chatter of the day, with Izuku animatedly recounting the moment that the waitress thought 𝐻𝐾𝐲 was his father, and Hazashi telling them about a kid who mangled English so much that Hazashi ended up laughing on the floor at what the boy had accidentally said. Nearing the end of the meal, Cream had jumped onto 𝐻𝐾𝐲's lap and promptly fell asleep, leaving the blonde in silent shock. Izuku finally took pity on the lost look on the boy's face and scooped up the cat, depositing her onto the couch. Afterwards, they got dressed for the night after convincing 𝐻𝐾𝐲 to stay over, and Izuku shoved some of his oversized clothes into the boy's arms. 𝐻𝐾𝐲 had laughed when he saw that 𝗵𝘃𝗲's shirt was written on the shirt. Izuku matched him with his own shirt saying 𝗵𝘃 pants, at which his brother fell on the floor, gasping for air as he cackled. They'd settled for having a movie night as none of the heroes had patrol. Let's just say that the brothers found it hard to choose between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. Honestly, the knowledge of pre-quirk things in this home is kind of concerning, considering how much of the pre-quirk era was lost in the quirk wars. The family fell asleep on the third Harry Potter movie, surrounded by blankets, pillows, and the cats, all thinking of how happy they were. And if 𝐻𝐾𝐲 called them his dads, well, sleep had a way of doing that. It's not like anyone corrected him.